Order the City of Oconomowoc Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. Has appropriate meeting notification been made?
Yes, Your Honor, it has.
If you could call roll, please.
Alderman Shellpepper,
Here.
Alderman Kavieski, Alderman Douglas,
Here.
Alderman Rozak,
Here.
Alderman Altman Cloth,
Here.
Alderman Ellis,
Yep.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Here.
Alderman Mulder.
Here.
Okay.
On to committee business, consider or recommend placement of an ordinance 22-01035 on the June 21st, 2022 council agenda, creating council agenda, an ordinance for council agendas related to alderman request to place items on the council agenda. Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mayor. The item before you tonight was requested by one of the aldermen to kind of define a process for being able to place items on an agenda. I worked with the mayor and the city, or the mayor and the city administrator, because he's such a smart guy, the mayor and the city attorney, on putting together this document. We felt that it covered everything that had been discussed. The document opens up indicating that the process would start with the alderman meeting with the mayor and/or the city administrator to discuss their item, look to see if it would move forward. For some reason, it didn't move forward, that the alderman would have the opportunity that under comments from the alderman, part of the council agenda, they could bring up a request for an item, and if it receives a second, then it would get placed on a future agenda. The timing of that would be worked through the city administrator, looking at staff time or the amount of time to put together the information that would be necessary in order for that to be discussed. So the item was requested. This process has been used a few times already, actually. It started out with Alderman Ellis when he requested traffic control at the intersection of Worthington and 2nd Street. We did bring that item to the Common Council. There was also mass vaccine was a request by Alderman Kowieski, who's not here, but we did take that to our Employee Safety Committee because that was the proper location for that. The council start time as requested by Alderman Spiegelberg, elected official terms, which is on the agenda tonight, and that was through Aldermans Ellis and Spiegelberg, and then the council agenda item, which was brought forth by Alderman Rozak. So we have been using this process to date, but now we're just putting it into an ordinance form.
I'd like to leave it open for discussion, and I think we're looking for how to move this forward. If you have suggestions, comments, to bring as it states to the next council meeting in 2 weeks. Alderman Spiegelberg.
I'm in support of this from the standpoint that I think other communities are even more restrictive in how they bring things to council, and some are far less restrictive. I think this is a good compromise. I'd like to hear from Alderman Rozak because I know he's looked into other communities and what they have been doing.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually spoke to the mayor in Delafield and the village president in Summit. They just simply add an item on. You know, there's a spot on their agenda for them just to add items, you know, willy-nilly by one alderman. Or, and you know, Summit's a village board member. Brookfield has a process that's a little bit more complex. There's timelines and weird stuff in there. New Berlin has a process that's similar to this. I'm trying to think who else. Waukesha's got a similar process. Yeah, overall, I like it. What I would like to do, and I've seen a couple different versions of this. This one's pretty good. I actually asked after the first version that you guys add in this reasonably practical language at the end because I don't think we want to jam anybody up. You know, if they can't get to something, you know, I don't think it's fair for us just to put an item on if it can't get, you know, hey, look, if it's, you know, let's talk about like maybe concealed carry, maybe that's something that's kind of quick, you know, here's a quick summary. If it's, we want to look at the entire fleet, that's going to take some time. So I liked that idea, but I think ultimately what I'd like to do is simplify this. So my thought would be change some of the language, take out a lot of the language at the beginning. I think it's superfluous, and just make it very simple. Any alderman may request to the mayor or the city administrator that an item be placed on a future agenda, period. And then then I've got another change. And then if an item is not, just simply, instead of making it kind of, like, I don't want it to seem like this is a conflict, because it's like, if it's denied or if it's not denied, if an item's not placed in the agenda during the aldermanic comments portion, then the rest of that section. So just really simplify it. Just, an item can be asked to be placed on the agenda to the mayor or the administrator, and then if the item's not placed in the agenda, then there's this other process. Instead of having all the kind of, we have to do the meeting, and what if it's denied? I kind of don't want to make it like a conflict. I think it should just be, hey, like what we have kind of been doing is somebody asks for something to be looked at, whether it's the mayoral term issue or pit bull ordinance or whatever, it's typically been done. My conceptualization on this is this prevents future mayors or future administrators from obstructing council, from moving forward with something that's either they want to push forward or something that constituents want to push forward. So I could redraft and make these changes more, could give it out at the next meeting or whatever. My goal is just, it's basically the exact same process, just simplifying the language. That's my thought.
Alderman Ellis?
The only concern that I have, and maybe I just didn't hear it, is I like the idea of more than just one councilman saying, I've got an idea and I want to go ahead and share it with everyone else. I like the idea of two or more coming to council and saying, okay, here's the idea, we really looked into it, we really did some homework, and I want to go ahead and go forward with that.
It is
So-
two. It is two.
It is two? Okay, okay.
Yeah, so
Okay,
the initial start of it is, one alderman may request something be added to the mayor or the administrator. And I think typically it's, we'll look into that, we start working on it. And if it's not put on, so instead of saying it's denied or been refused, like, I just think that language sounds confrontational. My thought is if the item's just not placed on, then I would just bring it up at, new business or during alderman comments. And then at that point, you have to get at least one other alderman. And to me, that prevents, because some of the other communities like Summit, like Delafield, it's a line item on their agendas right now where people can just add whatever they want. And I think that's a recipe for chaos. So,
Wouldn't Stan, I mean, if it's not on the agenda, it shouldn't be discussed. That's what Stan would tell us there.
on that agenda, but these other communities just have a line item where they can just add an item for the next agenda.
Oh, for
So-
the next agenda.
Correct,
Gotcha,
not
sorry.
that. Right, so they just have a line item in Summit, and I think for sure Delafield, where they can just simply add, it's like items for future council from aldermen or from council. And they just say, hey, I want to talk about stop signs on Second Street. And it's just automatically put on the next agenda. I also want to give us, that's why we added in that last part, is some flexibility with staff so that they have a reasonable time to get to something. Not just us saying, well, we want to do this now. Because I don't think that's fair to staff, because some things are more complicated than other things.
The other thing to think about too is where things were done early on, is a piece of paper was gone around, which I thought was the legal writing of what had to be done, and you had to have 5 people sign it before it would go on to an agenda item. Well, if you have 2 aldermen that are pretty passionate about doing this, well, in a walking quorum, they can't talk to these other aldermen to say, hey, this is why I want to do it. So I think this simplification makes it more, gives the opportunity for that topic to come forward. But like you said, Kevin, 2 people make a big deal. From a operational standpoint, we just want to make sure that we have good communication from our city administrator, so we put it into a timeline, because we've been asked to put different things on that have eventually gotten onto it, but sometimes they haven't fit ideally in your timeline as an alderman. So it's really all about communication. We'll do the best that we can. And for those things that we say, hey, we don't feel comfortable putting on, what we want to do is give you a reason why, because sometimes, and I think we have an example of like trucks and some of the things that we talked about earlier, Mark, where we can give you information that maybe you haven't thought about to decide whether or not you want to move forward with it.
Correct.
So do we need a motion to hold this over to the next meeting so he can clarify the verbiage and add the verbiage that he wants at the end?
I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to hold this over to the next meeting, which would be
June
21st.
21st, June 21st.
Are you guys
Second
okay?
that.
Are you guys okay with kind of my suggested of the changes in general?
I don't think you're hearing any opposition.
Yeah.
So
Well,
what are you saying, Matt?
What is with
Yeah.
you, Kevin?
Alderman Shellpepper.
Okay, so I think to simplify it, we remove the first two sentences. And we just leave it to, during an aldermanic comments portion of any meeting of the council, an alderman may request an item be placed on a future agenda, period.
Well,
Strike the rest. Why do
Well,
we have to codify that we have to, ask anything, additional, I guess is what I'm trying to
Well,
understand. I mean, I think you should, sure. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
is that decorum, but that's making it confusing, in my opinion.
I think the initial, I don't necessarily disagree with that either, but I think an initial request be made to the mayor or the administrator, I think is reasonable. And then if the item's not placed in the agenda for whatever reason, and that's not them, but some future mayor, some future administrator is obstructionist, they don't get along with council and I'm not gonna do that, ever. I'm never gonna give any city resources, then we have that alternative.
It helps the staff, the city administrator. If you want to put something on, they can sit down with you, and it might be Bob Duffy talking to you about something, or Joe Pickard on a certain topic. We can help utilize, and you guys can use the resources that we have for the city.
In the other cities I've taught, the other two cities I did and villages I did talk to, that is kind of the informal process anyway, that they are approached typically by other village board members or aldermen and asked for items to be placed on. And if for some reason somebody doesn't want to place it on, then they have that option in their agenda to place it on the next meeting. So to me, I mean, I think we should have to ask for something to be, I think we should take, go through that process and ask for something to be placed.
I think the way you're proposing it, I was in agreement with you, Chaz, until I thought about it more, and then it creates a dialogue between the mayor, the city administrator beforehand to really, so that the council member fully understands what they may not, versus a zinger in front of everybody saying, I want this on the agenda. So I think it provides a level, a buffer level.
Well, and I think we want city, our city business to be organized, and if people are just coming in willy-nilly trying to add things without at least trying to get something on in an informal process, to me, that this just doesn't seem the right way to do it.
So
That's the way I've always done it.
Okay, so what's the process you're recommending then?
It would just be, it would take out the first sentence and just say, an alderman may request to the mayor or the city administrator that an item be placed on a future agenda, period.
Okay, so
Very
it can be, it's or, it's not and or,
Correct.
it's
Yeah.
or.
Yeah, and then if
Yeah.
an item is not placed on the agenda, then boom, you can place it on the agenda at the next meeting.
And then the city and the staff can use the resources to try to help you understand an issue. I've experienced in the last 2 years where there's some really great ideas, but then we talk to a department head and go, oh geez, I didn't think of that. And so that's gonna help. It still can go on the agenda. It's not that it won't go on the agenda, but that gives you guys more information that maybe you don't have right now.
I think it's a fair compromise, because right now, I mean, really, I believe according to Robert's Rules of Order, we could simply one alderman could add something during new business if we wanted to. That's my opinion and interpretation of Robert's Rules. I'm not necessarily joined by that by our city attorney, but, who's not here, so I won't speak for him. But I think codifying this and giving a process to future councils is a big deal. So, but I'll work on some changes, and I can have that circulated by Mark.
So what I'm hearing is that you'd like us to move it forward to the next council meeting?
Yep.
With some of the changes that Alderman Rozak would like to make, and you'll work, Matt, with our city administrator on that?
You bet.
And would somebody make a motion for that?
So moved?
I made a motion.
Okay.
Right.
In a second?
Second?
Any further discussion, anything to help that process? And if something comes up to you, let Matt or let Mark know, because all this is still open for discussion. We just want to make sure we do it right, because it does have a long-term effect for future mayors, future city administrators. Is spot on. Call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper,
Aye.
Alderman Douglas,
Aye.
Alderman Rozak,
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth,
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
On to our next item is we have an update from the Rockwell Partners. Mr. Scream and Mr. Debink.
Evening, members of the council, mayor, and city staff. Believe it or not, it was 3 weeks ago already that we were here on May 17th. And I just want to start out by thanking particularly the city staff for all the continued work with us as we refine the proposal. We want to take just a few minutes tonight to mention a few things that have changed, not in large measure, but just so you fully understand where the project's at before we go into closed session this evening. So
And
I'm gonna-
council, interrupt for just, council, if you have questions, you can ask questions at the end of their presentation.
We're going to try to keep this to literally less than 10, so we'll see what we do. I'll turn it over to Jeff now.
Good evening, everyone. Special thanks again to the city staff, the mayor, for all their help in getting us this far. I want to provide for you a few updates on the project tonight. We've been doing some extensive community outreach, as many of you are aware. We had a meeting with the downtown businesses on May 16th. We had around 25 people attend, and the feedback that we got was quite positive, especially centered around the idea of adding public bathrooms to the downtown. With that in mind, we will be accelerating that portion of our construction. So once we get approved, we'll make the bathrooms a top priority to be open as soon as possible. We're also open to discussing with the city the possibility of putting temporary bathrooms there next summer, so we can get bathrooms on the green ASAP. We also had an open house for residents on June 1st. We had around 90 people attend, so it was a very good turnout. And we did do surveys of the people that went through, and almost everyone found it very helpful. We had a number of people come that actually wanted to buy in the new building, so that was a pleasant surprise, and many people loved the architecture.
Take a deposit yet, John?
No. Mary Claire, who's our public relations person, she will be here for the council portion, public comment, and she'll give you a more specific update. On May 23rd, we met with the German Christmas Market Board, and that was a very good meeting. And we wanted to let them know that our intention is to be a good neighbor and that we want them to do the market on the green this year. We will hold back our construction on the part of the parking lot which they need to use, and we'll cooperate with them so the German market can be held there this year and, of course, successive years. They're very happy with our ideas for the city green, the village green, and the TIF dollars that we're proposing to be allocated to improve the green, which will actually make it easier and better for their event. So they were very excited and supportive about that. They were also happy with the part of our plan where we're proposing that the city parking lot extends about 18 feet into the green, because they're still able to use that space, because that parking lot will be a public space. They will still be able to use that space for their event, so they were happy to see that as well. And next, we want to provide an update on the TIF, and Dirk will speak on that.
As I think you all may be aware, the TIF has been a bit of a journey where we first proposed a schedule of items and a dollar amount of approximately $6.2 million. City came back to us, the staff, requesting that we look at, after talking with Ellers, a lesser amount in order to stay within a time frame where it might be paid back, 15 years or less, hopefully. And as we looked at that, and I know we got some comments from you all in the one-to-one meetings. Well, wait a minute. We also want to make sure we're doing this right. We want to make sure that we're giving the community the quality that they expect and the quality that we want to emulate the project that we're working on. And so we submitted a revised TIF schedule, which I hope you all have, on May 24th. I just want to highlight two areas of that. One is the Village Green, which was the most significant increase, going up from $275,000 to $650,000, and there's some items that were listed on there to make it very clear what we're doing there. And I think the primary one is to try to do our best to, we haven't done the surveying work yet, but to level that green out again so that it's more usable and that all the space there can be used by things like the Christmas market. The other one that I think was very important that we added was the contingency, a $250,000 contingency. That's not our contingency, that's your contingency. And in fact, all the dollars in this TIF, we want to make sure that you all, I'm sure you are aware of this, and the public is aware also that if there are excess dollars, they don't go to the developer. You know, they stay with the city, and you choose how you're going to use those dollars. And you'll also have oversight on the entire process all the way through, knowing how and where we're spending the dollars that we're spending. So I don't think we've got a report back from Ellers yet. At least I haven't seen it if we have, on how many years we're talking about, but we're in excess of 15, perhaps 17, 18 years.
18 years.
18 years, okay. Going in, and again, as we all know how TIFs work, if they work well, you can actually see that come down because the assessment's going up, but you want to be conservative going in. So that's where we stand with the TIF. Hopefully, again, delivering the the project and the items within this TIF that we really need to make this project successful. So that's the TIF update, and a final comment, I think, from Jeff.
Yep, and just a few more updates. A couple of questions were received. One was, what is the size of the proposed public bathrooms in our building and the community room? We are back to our original public bathroom size and the original community room size. So we did have a version of the plans where that space actually shrunk because we were trying to fit other things in on the main floor, but we were able to rework the plan and go back to the original size for the proposed community room and the bathrooms. And we're still flexible on that. So depending on your feedback, if you want us to reduce or enlarge either the bathroom space or the community space, we're happy to do that. We've also received questions on the green space, and I know you know this, but this is also for the public. Our proposal does, we do propose to expand the city parking lot by about 18 feet, which would come into the north end of the city green. Along with that, we're proposing to remove the redundant sidewalks which go through the middle of the green. So we actually end up with the same amount of green space that's currently there. We're not reducing green space, but we're proposing to keep the same amount of green space while expanding the overall space for the public. So the public will have more access to the lake and more space to use with the boardwalk, the community room, and the bathrooms. Also wanted to let you know that we've been in contact with the local fire district, and they will be practicing in our buildings the next couple of months. So if you see firefighters there with ladders and smoke machines, we thought that would be a good thing, you know, since the buildings are vacant right now, that they can use them for safety and practice.
They were there today.
Yeah. So with that said, we'll open it up. Dirk and I are happy to answer any questions if you want anything clarified.
Council members, any questions for Dirk or for Jeff? Alderman Ellis.
I see that the original investment request was for 6.2, and now your revised proposed is 5.8. What are we losing?
Well, the primary thing that we lost early on, when the first iteration, was the north end of the boardwalk. That was in at $750,000, so that came out, and those dollars were reallocated in a number of different other areas. The other thing that we do have in now that we didn't originally have in is the professional services. You see that line of $100,000, which that was important to come back in. So, and then, as I mentioned before, thanks, Jeff, the contingency. So we felt like, frankly, we lost too much, you know, on May 10th, and so now we've come back, we think, to, I don't want to necessarily call it a happy medium, but the place where we can get the job done correctly. And in some ways, thank goodness that we aren't doing the North Boardwalk, because that $750,000 would have to come out of somewhere else to try to keep the TIF even at 18 years. So,
Alderman Spiegelberg.
First of all, I want to thank you guys for everything you've done to be transparent in this process and very professional, and it looks like a fabulous opportunity. The blight part, I'm 100% on board with. That's the biggest complaint that I get in my district, and you've heard me say that before. However, with the different scenarios that you've met with business people and residential people, and the emails we've gotten and the phone calls we've gotten, there are those that I feel personally are way on the one side. Hey, we want this is great, let's do it. And those on the other side, hey, let's restore these buildings over here and not do anything, which to me is not a possibility. But I got a lot of people in between there, and a lot of people, some former aldermen, their spouses, a lot of people that I really respect in this community that say, we love this, but we don't like the 5 stories. Have you thought through potentially, if that doesn't go through as a 5-story, what would that look like? And obviously, that would maybe allow us to go more back towards the 15-year TIF, but would potentially allow less money, obviously, for the public spaces. But would you address that with me? And then I would also like to hear if any other aldermen have had those same concerns.
Yep. Thank you. That's a very good question. I think we touched on this at the last meeting, but I'm happy to talk about it again tonight. The way that the building is valued, the highest part of the value of the building is on the top floor. So if we have to reduce the height, that's going to take a significant bite out of the value that we're creating and the new assessed value that we're creating. And it would take a significant bite out of the dollars that will then be available for the TIF and the public infrastructure. Right now, we're looking at, our building will be adding about $30 million to what's currently there. If we take off the top floor, that's going to reduce it to about 20 million. So that's a very significant cut, and that's just because people are willing to pay more to be on the top floor and to have those views. So if we're forced to do that, your TIF dollar amount's going to be contract significantly.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. And I understand that, and the individuals that I've talked with also understand that, but they're still in favor of bringing that down one level. I know you talked about the quality of the building would maybe be compromised. Could you talk about that again? I don't see that as being a significant issue. As far as you mentioned the brick, going to a thinner type of brick, I don't see that as being a significant issue if that had to be addressed.
Yeah, when we, and I'm happy to answer that. A little bit of history. So when we were here before you in November and we sort of threw out a wish list of all the different options, and you said you want us to come back with plans on 5 items, we scaled our building to be able to have the value to pay for those 5 public improvement areas. And one of them, which you just mentioned, is to do the really high-end, truly historic architecture. So if we don't have the economy of scale, if we don't have the building of the same size, then we don't have the money there, the same amount of money there to put into the exterior or the public improvements. So yeah, specifically, rather than using real brick, we may be forced to go to the thin brick. We may be have to take off crown molding, reduce the amount of windows, reduce the amount of arches. There certainly would not be as much money there for the boardwalk or the other public improvements, and we may end up taking out the warming house, the public bathrooms. So yeah, we can scale it back, but we don't want to because we did all this work based on the feedback we received from you back in November.
Alderman Rozak.
Yeah, those are good questions, Karen. I've received some of the same calls about those concerns for the size. I think one of the things that happens too when you reduce the size or the ultimate assessed value of the project is your TIF. Either you don't do all the public improvements or the TIF goes longer, and it takes longer to pay back if you want to continue to do the public improvements with it. So I think there's a little give and take there. I've been opposed to us changing zoning in other areas that significantly changes the use and what goes in. So like Hackney House, like Journey 21, we took an area that was master planned and significantly changed the zoning from suburban residential to high density 4-story apartments with 800 plus residents. This, even though we're giving the extra height and reducing the setbacks, doesn't change the overall commercial use of the space. And in fact, expands that for the downtown. So then you have to ask yourself, I think, ultimately, what's the reasonableness of the overlay? And when the overlay was put in, that overlay on that section spread around the whole downtown because Fong's was still there and other buildings were still in that area. Once those buildings are all gone, we just have this small strip that goes above the 50 feet threshold. So I do think it's a little different. It's really not changing the nature of what we're doing, and we're putting parking underground and everything else to alleviate any concerns with regard to parking. So that's kind of my thought with regard to the height, if that makes sense. I think those are good questions. I've said some of the same things I just said to the people that have called me or emailed me. It's a small sliver of land that we're changing or propose to change that height so that we can pay off and do the public improvements that we've desired to finish and do there for probably a decade. And I think they're going to be a good public-private partner for us. That's my thoughts on that.
Alderman Mulder.
So I think we've all had the same type of comments. I guess I understand the penthouse not being in the market. I can understand why people want the top floor. There'll still be a top floor. It'll just be at 48 feet instead of 60 feet. And you're taking out an entire floor of value. I understand that. But to shrink the value from 30 million to 20 million by asking people to be 12 feet lower in space, that seems like a dramatic drop.
Yeah, well, you meant, you articulated it. Let me try to repeat that, maybe say it in a different way. You're not only reducing a floor, which takes away 20% of the value, right there, if you just split it evenly. But then you're taking away the value of where people will pay the most and where they want to be. So it does end up taking 30% of value away.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
But you're still on the lake, though. I mean, you're still getting the view, right? And Matt, you were talking about changing the nature of the overlay. I mean, I think the overlay was designed with sight lines in mind, right? And if we're putting the building at 70 feet, I understand that people across the street can go to 70 feet eventually, but they're not seeing the lake. Fowler Lake's gone for them. It's not going to happen. They have that ability right now to build up, to get that view. They're going to be cut off totally from it. So it does impact the sight lines and the original intent of the overlay, however you want to mix it.
Is there any other questions before we go into closed session? I want to make sure if we have any factual questions that we have for Mr. Screamer and Mr. Debink, that we gather that before we go into closed session for deliberation.
Yeah, one more.
Sure, Alderman Mulder?
So the expansion of the parking lot gives parking for the people that'll be using the retail and the restaurant, which is important. How much of that is needed in order to facilitate the underground parking that you need to turn out? Would we have to do the full donation of that 18 feet, the entire length of the park, or could you just take a part of that and accomplish what you need to for the turn in and turn out?
Let me take a stab at answering that. So whether or not on top it's parking or green space, we could still build the parking beneath that we need. So if the city chose not to put parking there, we'd have green space there, but we would still have our parking underneath it. That said, I think, and I'm sure Mary Claire will say this later, one of the number one things, maybe top ones we've heard, is the need for parking. And one can say, well, yeah, but you've got retail there now, retail you're putting in. Well, there's been retail that's been taking that over the years too. So we really do need more parking on North Main, and whether it's a one-story commercial building that goes there or our proposal. And so I think these 10 stalls are really important to the people we've talked to, at least.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
But that's up to you, of course.
Alderman Mulder's comment begs another question. The underground parking that is allocated right now would be for all of the residents going up to a 5-story building.
Correct.
If that would come down to a 4-story building, could that affect the cost of that underground parking because you wouldn't need as much underground for the residents?
Yeah, I think, the upper floor will have 3 units in it, so that'd be 6 stalls that it could be eliminated. I have to look at the plan. I don't think you can just eliminate 6 stalls. You'd still have that whole parking line probably. And also to clarify too, underneath underground parking, there's also 1 stall for each of the commercial residents, or commercial properties as well. So that's correct. Again, trying to get them inside the building versus taking up city parking.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Because the city's going to be renting, basically, we're going to be leasing, right? A warming hut and a public restroom, right? Is that correct?
The way it was proposed is the city would own it.
We're going to be owning it, so we're going to be owners. And
If you so choose.
And so, okay, so, and how many parking stalls does every owner get in the building?
2.
Okay, so we get 2 as well then in that underground parking area?
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that before.
We hadn't thought of that, but we can explore that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay. Any other comments, questions before we go into closed session? I'd like to go ahead and move into closed session to convene in conference room number 3 per Wisconsin State Statute 19.851E, deliberating and negotiating the purchasing of public properties and investing of public funds or conducting other specific public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, public-private partnership for Rockwell Partners, LLC redevelopment project TIF request. So I'd like to entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
One moment, please.
To adjourn.
We need Matt and Chris. We'll just wait one moment. We just finished closed session and close that closed session, and we just have to close the open session to get on to our council meeting. So just a formality. We have one alderman, I think, that might have taken a break, so we'll wait for him. There we go. We entertain a motion to
We're not
close
gonna say any names.
Common Council Committee of the Whole.
We had Matt Mulder and Karen Spiegelberg make the motion in second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Thank you very much. And for those of you that have come to make public comments, thank you very much. I have your cards. We're going to switch IT platforms so we can start the Common Council meeting in just a moment. And again, I apologize for the delay, but we had some great deliberations in closed session. Thank you to all the
Hope
council
it's
members.
working. It's not working.
So if anybody in the audience would like to make a comment, there's some blue cards. We have quite a few blue cards, which is great. Thank you, everyone, for coming. When we come to the
I didn't have to
comments and suggestions from citizens section,
I just said
I
no.
will call out your name. If you could please come to the podium. Please state your name, your address, and the city in which you're located.
I hit
And
no.
you have 3 minutes to provide
did the same thing.
insights and thoughts
Okay,
that you
that was
have
good.
on the
Okay.
topic you'd like to share with council. It's not a two-way dialogue. It's really an opportunity for you to tell the council your opinion. If it has to do with issues that are on the agenda for tonight, those are going to be discussed a little bit later, and we definitely welcome all of your insights.
Ready now,
Ready?
Mayor? Yes.
Okay. I'd like to call to order the City of Oconomowoc Common Council meeting for Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. Has appropriate meeting notification been made?
Yes, Your Honor, it has.
If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome, everyone. Roll call, please.
Alderman Shellpepper?
Here.
Alderman Kavieski? Alderman Douglas?
Here.
Alderman Rozak?
Here.
Alderman Altman-Cloth?
Here.
Alderman Ellis?
Here.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Here.
Alderman Mulder?
Here.
Great. I entertain a motion for approval of the minutes dated May 17th, 2022.
So moved.
Second, Ellis.
All in favor?
Aye.
On to comments and suggestions from citizens. Again, that's just what I mentioned earlier. I'm going to start with the first one on my desk, Mary Claire Lancer. And again, I will have a little time clock up here for 3 minutes. And if you're going over, I'll just try to respectfully ask you to bring your comments together and close. Thank you.
Good evening. Mary Claire Lancer of Lancer Public Affairs. I just wanted to step up here and talk a little bit about, to date, what does the outreach look like for the Rockwell project? As I think you all know, that this is what I've primarily been working on. Just quickly, chronologically, November 4 and 6, I visited 23 businesses. November 6 and 13, 79 homes. April 23, 42 homes. April 26 to 28, 42 businesses. On May 13, Jeff Screama visited businesses. On May 16, we had a special presentation for businesses. You should have a summary on that. On May 27, Jeff Screama visited homes, and on June 1, a special open house for residents, and you should have a summary on that. And before I take my seat, I want to give you the sign-in sheets for both of those recent public information sessions. I just wanted to share my impressions after all this time. Business owners and residents felt respected to be shown the first draft back in November and have their input considered as subsequent drafts were developed that they saw in April. The more people learn about the proposal, and especially the details, the more positive they are. The architecture and boardwalk extension are game changers for most people. When I would show even just the cover of the project plan, people were already loving it. The Rockwell development will beget more investment by owners of downtown Oconomowoc properties to spend money to improve facades, build out unused spaces, and to strengthen the sense of business-to-business community. Many current residents of single-family homes have asked about purchasing condo units. In fact, more seriously interested people than the 20 units that will become available. At first, priorities of the business community were different from those of residents. Now it seems there is consistency of support among both sectors. I have never worked in a community with such a high percentage of business owners that are also residents, or a community where so many people have lived their whole lives. I came to better understand what makes the city of Oconomowoc so loved. If it needs to, this is what people told me, if it needs to be 5 stories to make the project work at this level of quality, so be it. With upper stories set back, it looks like less than that. People know how to get more information. My name and number are on all the invitations, and I gave my card to everyone I met with. It takes time to look into the project and care enough to ask questions. People posting on social media are mostly reacting to misinformation. When I can see names, I check them against my records of door-to-door and now the sign-in sheets. Few, if any, have invested the time to get answers to their concerns and questions or to understand the process. You have my reports to date. I will personally continue to reach out to anyone who wants to talk about the Rockwell Partners project. I have a unique perspective of liaison between the public and the development team. I cannot recall when I have been as proud to represent a development or a development team as I am with this one. Jeff Screama has told me to, quote unquote, do everything you think is important with the outreach. I appreciate that outreach is a priority for him, especially when it does take a bit of time to do it right. As a former alderman and mayor of the city of New Berlin, I know how it feels to sit where you do, and I try to see this proposal through your eyes. I fully believe this development will be a source of pride to City of Oconomowoc residents for decades and generations to come, and I'm proud to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Stahl or Stelly? I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, fellow aldermen. My name's Rick Stahle. I live in Heartland. I came to Oconomowoc in 1960 and spent my first night in the hotel that's now gone. I left in 1973 to take a 4-year career in the United States Air Force. A couple years ago, my family opened the Keller Williams real estate office in downtown Heartland. After investigating Delafield, Oconomowoc, and the Lake Country area, we now have 100 agents in Heartland, which may arguably have the largest market share of any of the individual offices in Lake Country. Though I don't live in Oconomowoc, I applaud you for looking at this development. You're going to have a lot of naysayers in the audience tonight for development. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for Oconomowoc to grow. And none of us are driving our grandparents' 1939 Chevrolets. And I have a 1933 home, and I don't live and use the 1933 refrigerator that came with the home. This is a blighted block in the community, and I applaud you for taking the right direction. The question that you will ultimately have to wrestle with is what is the appropriate density? Dirk's a friend of mine, Dirk Debbink of MSI. Is 5 stories appropriate? Is 4 stories appropriate? What is the appropriate density? The right move is to redevelop this blighted block in the community, to enhance the tax base, and to give opportunities for people in their 60, 70, whatever, to downsize from homes and live in, 2020 related building opportunities. So your question will ultimately be, what's the proper density? The project is a win, and I applaud you for proceeding accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. James Larson?
Council members, hi, Mayor.
Move your name, please.
James Larson, 70 North Lake Road, Oconomowoc. I have a concern or several concerns with the Rockwell development. And I think Jason said that about 4 or 5 years ago, perhaps, or about 4 years ago, Jason said that the overlay for the height recommendations for downtown was done. So that's not that long ago. And the Rockwell project is zoned for 50 feet and they want 70 plus, whatever that means. And I'm not sure about the setback zoning on Fowler Lake, but I think it's 45 feet, but I could be wrong on that. But I guess my main concern is the height, and the project shouldn't deviate from that. And as long as we're talking about height across the street then, I mean, does that mean those folks who are zoned for, I believe it's 70 feet across the street from this Rockwell project, that then they might ask for either increased height or they might feel slighted because they thought their potential project would look over the top, or a couple stories of their potential project would look over the top of this Rockwell building and not right into it. So that's my main concern. I do have a concern with the taking of 20 feet of the village green to be used for parking. And I do think that the $1.5 million TIF is actually a gift to developers on the taxpayers' back. So thanks for hearing my concerns.
Thank you. Laura Gibbs?
Okay.
You're good.
Hi, hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I have some concerns and comments about the Rockwell development project as well. And I just want to start by saying I think that there are a lot of architectural solutions that can result in an attractive building on this site. I don't think we have to be married at this point to anything. For height, I just want to bring up the same point that within the last 5 years, the zoning in this area was adjusted and is now being abandoned. There was a lot of thought and rationale as to why the zoning differs on either side of the street. The zoning in place allows for the west side of the street to provide future development with top floor views of Fowler Lake. The Rockwell building at 70-plus feet infringes on future development of the block across the street and lowers their property values significantly. So I say top the height at 55 to 60 feet, and I think that a rooftop patio looks real well at that height as well. I also have concerns if both sites are eventually built out, and do we create, kind of a canyon wind tunnel on that? Can we look up and see the sky when we're at 70 feet on either side of the street, really? On the boardwalk, I really feel like Rockwell should build, develop, maintain their own lakefront and their own pier. I would love to see the city continue and follow through with the boardwalk from the existing location around the corner to the north parking lot where the city and Rockwell properties meet. I think we can add that the city public pier as well, and we can take the public boat moorings and move them to the second pier, and that will accommodate Fowler Lake boat traffic. The developer said that they have a restaurant interested in the space on the front of the building near the lake. I think it would be an asset and draw for the downtown to have a restaurant with outdoor seating like that. But extending the boardwalk across, I think it's approximately 150 feet or less of the Rockwell site, we removed that option. The proposed restaurant and seating, it shouldn't spill on to the public boardwalk. as we see downtown. Sometimes it's single file now down those streets instead of having room for people and restaurants, seating. Rather than foot traffic, I think that foot traffic should go along the street side of the building, and that brings people into the Village Green, past the new retailers in the Rockwell building. And it allows access to the businesses on the other side of the street and brings people downtown shopping district. The warming house and bathrooms. I don't think the city should build a warming house or bathrooms on the Rockwell site. A warming house, in generous terms, will be used 3 to 4 months of the year. We're duplicating this facility as well. It already exists.
I'm going to have you try to wrap up if you
Okay.
can.
It already exists at the rec center, lower level lakeside. Instead of a warming house, let's encourage skaters to go to the local businesses, eat, stay, and shop in the downtown business district. Winter's a quieter time in downtown businesses, and I think businesses would like the opportunity. They could put together a skater special, hot cocoa soup and beverage. Bathrooms, there's a proposal to build bathrooms on the Village Green. The city owns that property, and they should be built there to serve the community and community events. Lastly would be parking. I know we want to remove that 18 feet, the 18 feet from the green, but we need it. We're being told that when we have things, larger things in that space, that those parking spaces will actually be blocked. So we do need that space in it. I think rather than eliminating
I'm sorry, if
the
you can kind of
setbacks-
wrap up, please.
Rather than eliminating the setbacks, I think it's 5 feet between the Rockwell building and the city lot. Why not forgive the setback and work it into that 18 feet? So if you, at most, you reduce it 13 feet and not 18 feet. I think that the developers should access their property without utilizing the city lot. I think that would mean more parking available to the city that we could capture rather than giving away. I'm sorry I went over my time, if I did, and I have other questions with this whole thing, but I think that, this only came out 2 weeks ago. I think there's too many unanswered questions and too many really, really big things that the city needs to consider before moving forward with a $5 million TIF.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Bertrand.
Mayor, Council, thank you for having me. My name is Mike Bertrand. I live in the town of Oconomowoc, but I also run and own and operate a business in the city of Oconomowoc. My wife and I own Lago Subella Tan Restaurant in Eagles Landing. So I'm very familiar with condo development and condo living and what it looks like to have blighted property and having the opportunity, like we're looking at in front of us right now, to replace that property with something, a beautiful project such as the Rockwell. I'm in full support of it. The height, the water setback, I think because the top 2 stories are set back, again, you wouldn't have that tunnel effect as you're driving through downtown, because as you're looking up, those top 2 stories are set back. It'd be very difficult to see those, or maybe just the tops of them, which would be ornate, according to the pictures. I think that encroaching into the 18 feet of the green space, I think it would be beneficial to the parking lot, along with the fact that they're adding the parking. In doing so, you're basically moving the egress to that parking lot further away from the side of what would be the building, allowing for better sight lines and better safety in entering and leaving that parking lot. And I think that the boardwalk, extending the boardwalk across there would also be very beneficial. So as I mentioned, I'm in the restaurant business. I think before the rumors start flying around, I'm just gonna let the cat out of the bag. I've been in extensive conversations with Jeff about taking over or purchasing the first floor restaurant space. To answer your questions, there would be some outdoor dining because then there'd be plenty of room for the boardwalk and the outdoor dining, because the first floor is set back, I believe it's some 12 feet. So that would be the outdoor dining. The boardwalk would not be interrupted or obstructed with any of the outdoor dining. I would like to discuss the warming hut. I think that the warming hut could be something that, from a city standpoint, could be difficult to manage. I would propose and be open to conversations that if, I think that the warming hut, that space is prime retail, prime restaurant space, and I would be looking to purchase that portion of it, and then possibly leaving the warming hut to the private sector. And then we could open up discussions with possibly having a co-op with the city, where for 2.5 months or 3 months of the year, we would let the city use it for a warming hut. And that, that was certainly, there could be anything open for conversations there. The problem that we have with the warming hut and the bathrooms being right there with the way I envision the restaurant as to how it should be and incorporate itself with the boardwalk, the bathrooms are not desirable. You know, we're looking to open up a higher end, a nicer, high scale restaurant there, having for 2.5 or 3 months of the year, kids coming off the ice and congregating there, taking off their skates, hockey sticks, everything else. People using the bathrooms there. It's not really something that you would envision being surrounding a entrance to a nicer restaurant. I would propose and suggest that an opportunity with the bathrooms as they're proposed next to the et cetera building. There's money in the budget already set aside for that project. I think you could increase the square footage for 100% by only using 50% more money. And I think the space is there for, you know, as opposed to having 6 restaurants here and 6 stalls over here, combining and having 12 all in one location, it provides for better maintenance, better monitoring, and just being able to consolidate where the vision needs to be to make sure that bathrooms are well taken care of. And for that, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina Donald?
Thank you. My name is Christina Donald. I live at 610 North Oakwood Avenue. I talked to a few of you over the week, and I thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I stand here before you again, as we have many times before, in this town as the city is faced with tearing down more buildings and building another condo project. I brought with me one of my many books I have on Oconomowoc history. Not many small towns have books written about their history and architecture. Tonight, when I was thinking about what I might say when I came here, I opened the book, and ironically, it turned to this page. Let me read a bit of it to you. This is a letter that was written to Adelia Rockwell, the daughter of John Rockwell, by James Luck in 1908. And I'm not going to read the whole letter, but it says, "My dear friend, in your last letter, you wished me to give you a description of Oconomowoc as I found it on my first arrival in 1847. We arrived in Milwaukee on the 27th of June and took the stagecoach the next morning for Oconomowoc. When we inquired the way to Oconomowoc and whether we could engage a conveyance, we did not think we could. Oconomowoc was a dilapidated hamlet and no road beyond, only an Indian trail. Consequently, it was a jumping-off place for civilization. When we finally reached Oconomowoc, we found indeed that it was a mere hamlet, not a house on the corner where the Jones house now stands. The first thing that attracted our attention was a part of the mill pond covered with stumps near where the mill now stands. The next attraction was the old mill, next the sawmill, and the Rockwell residence. Next, we crossed the old bridge, and there we stopped to take a surprise look at the charming lake scenery on each side of the road, and is the glory of Oconomowoc today." This letter was written in 1908. It says, "The most beautiful scene is still impressed on my memory. Soon after this, we entered by an old Indian trail and corduroy road." It's ironic to me that all that is Rockwell and Oconomowoc and everything in these books is becoming a memory. And we are again faced with a building out of scale and scope for the land. The setbacks are not being followed. The density is just too much. The views described in this book from the four corners are gone. The view of the church, which is iconic in this town, would be blocked. When are we going to stop tearing down our history, granting variances for heights that are out of scope and out of the master plan, and replacing it with buildings named after the iconic historic buildings and buildings that we are tearing down? Draper Hall, the Rockwell, Even the tavern is on the State Historical Register. Alfred Rockwell's house, described in this book, was taken down earlier this year. When are we going to enact a Landmarks Commission per state statute 62.23 to save what charm and history of this town is left? Let me read part of that statute. A city may regulate by ordinance, or if a city contains any property that is listed on the National Register of Historic Places in Wisconsin or the State Register of Historic Places, shall not later than 1995 enact an ordinance to regulate any place, structure, or object with a special character, historic, archaeological, or aesthetic interest, or other significant value, for the purpose of preserving the place, structure, or object, its significant characteristics. A city may create a landmarks commission and establish historic districts subject to 2 and 2M. The city may regulate, or if the city contains any property that is listed on the National Register of Historic Places in Wisconsin or the State Register of Historic Places, shall regulate all historic or archaeological landmarks and all property within each historic district to preserve the historic or archaeological landmarks and property within the district and the character of the district. These buildings were not blighted. They were abandoned by the owners recently so they could build. The tavern was open a year ago. Builders buy property knowing the setbacks and heights, but we continue to give variances. Why?
If
And
you
why?
can wrap up, please.
Sure. And why should the taxpayer care or pay for any of this via a TIF? Please preserve the views, the history, stand firm on our heights and setbacks, and finally, once and for all, create a landmarks commission to preserve what is left. I'm not against development, but not every piece of land needs to generate $100,000 in taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. David Rupnow.
Yeah, good evening. Couple compliments that I hope the mayor doesn't use against my time. One is we've lived here 45 years and we think the downtown is wonderful. 2, Thackeray Trail, which I don't live very far from, I thought may end up with too much traffic with the repair. It is beautiful and works well.
Could you please state your address and?
Oh, sure. My address is 800 Byron Drive in the city of Oconomowoc.
Thank you, sir.
One more quick thing. My wife has Alzheimer's, and there are times we've had to call the police to kind of help find her, and they have been great. And especially kudos to Officer Derwachter for doing such a great job.
Thank you.
So, but I have some things here that I'm concerned about. 5 weeks ago, the city council passed an ordinance allowing conceal and carry in municipal buildings. Now, I know each one of you is very concerned about public safety, but your motion was hasty, and so was the discussion. It seemed more about expanding gun rights than public safety. I am well aware of the fact that the police moving out of this building causes you to review the entire situation. I have done quite a bit of research on this, and I've talked to numerous people, from the mayor to city council people now, to former current council people, to administrators and all the rest, just trying to educate myself on the city's needs on this. I never heard, in your discussion, I never heard much about anything regarding the rec center events. If I'm right on this, apparently now, if my information is correct, it would be easier for someone to bring alcohol drinks to a person possessing a gun under concealed carry than it was before. To me, you don't mix weddings and reunions with alcohol and guns. The vote on, I understand you tried to engage the 32 communities to help you make the decision. What I heard at the May 3rd meeting were results that somewhat sounded like 30-2, somewhat sounded like 15-2, but at the end was called 17-15. And I still do not understand the arrival of that answer, and I'd like to thank Alderman Spielberg for bringing up the question. I know some of you are strong gun rights supporters and would not desire gun rights ahead of public safety. However, conceal and carry in municipal buildings is a serious issue. I feel the discussion warranted more than it got on May 3rd. The motion was given only one reading, the discussion a mere 20 minutes, and the only pushback was from a question that got an answer that was clear as mud. One former alderman who served more than one term told me that he chose not to run because a dysfunction on this group, that there are too many outspoken people and not enough people doing their homework. That's the charge from somebody else. I was told by a current alderman that Wisconsin's 2011 loosening of gun laws had made things safer in Wisconsin. I found research that directly refutes that. But hey,
I'm going to have you wrap up here.
sure,
shortly, please.
just a few. But hey, you can all do your research. You don't need mine. It's all out there. And I ask that you do it and that you do it for more than this. Finishing up real quickly, I have a thing to pass out regarding Republican conservative who was nominated by the Supreme Court and appointed by a Republican who said that the gun lobby is a fraud using the Second Amendment. That was not what it was for.
Okay,
When
thank you.
when the Second Amendment was written, the gun of choice was a musket. So, okay, last three things, it's 3 sentences, I'll go right now, okay? There are recommendations for all of you, hope I got them here. I guess I don't. One is that each one of you do research. 2, that people check their partisan views and things they can't live with at the door and listen. And 3rd, maybe there is a little dysfunction. I've been part of groups that need a kick in the butt. Maybe you do too. Thank you.
Thank you. Pete Holmes.
My name is Pete Holmes. I reside at 237 Shore Circle. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, especially my alderpersons, Cloth and Ellis, who have been in contact with regards to my presentation tonight. This evening, in the interest of safety, I'm asking the Oconomowoc Common Council to support signage for a no trucking, no construction traffic zone, if you will, on Oconomowoc Parkway, west from Silver Lake Road leading to the Arrowwood subdivision construction site. Since the Arrowwood subdivision construction site has begun, there's been an influx of large construction vehicles using the parkway, dump trucks with dirt, dump trucks with fresh asphalt, large cement trucks with concrete, large semi-tractor trailers with bulldozers, asphalt paving machines and front-end loaders. Many mornings, this one being one of them, 6:35 this morning, when a semi came through the Oconomowoc Parkway at 6:35 and used what's called an engine brake. Now, I work for a Peterbilt distributorship in Waukesha, so I know very well what an engine brake is. And if you're not familiar with it, it's when they use the engine to slow the vehicle in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. I'll never know why. And it goes, brrr. And when that happens at 6:35 in the morning, unnecessarily, I don't get it. People in my industry tell me engine brakes are used when a semi-driver is in a stop-and-go traffic and when driving on downhill grades. That's it, folks. There's no downhill grade in front of Oconomowoc Parkway, and there's no stop-and-go traffic at 635, so it's really unnecessary. And I relayed that information to my alderpersons by text message this morning. My plan is simple and moreover safer than the current method of getting to this construction site. It involves using Valley Road all the way to the west end of Oconomowoc Parkway, which is where it comes around to. Two instances come to mind that I have personally witnessed since I live right near the parkway. First, I observed a dump truck with asphalt traveling north on Highway 67 from the expressway. I happened to be coming from Pick and Save. The driver of this truck turned west on Oconomowoc Drive by Chili's, and I didn't understand why. Then he turned north on Corporate Center Drive and ended up on Valley Road. Had he stayed on 67, he would have got to Valley Road all on his own. He then continued on Silver Lake where he turned north and then west on Oconomowoc Parkway. What it told me was that the vendors to this project are not planning their route very well and have no idea necessarily where they're going at any given point. Not being familiar with this area, this truck now crosses the Lake Country Trail, and that affects District 2, District 1, District 4, and District 3 residents. First, it's at the trail crossing on Silver Lake Road. The second is the trail crossing on Oconomowoc Parkway. That's just east of Shore Circle, Royal Ridge, since our neighborhood is a circle, Lake Ridge West. Why would the city allow such a potentially dangerous situation to go unchecked? With the end of the school year coming Friday, there will be kids on bicycles, skateboards, hoverboards, frequently the Lake Country Trail, and maybe some of you have done that on your bicycles or walking with your dog or your kids or your grandkids. They will be using the basketball courts and playground equipment at Summit Intermediate Schools. Walkers, hikers, people with dogs, young children use that trail to get to Imagination Station and the parks on the north end of town.
If you can wrap up, please, sir,
Absolutely.
that would be great.
The second observation I took note of involved a large cement truck. It came in from the east, but it went out to the west and went down Valley Road to the expressway and got on the expressway, I assume to go to the Zignego plant on Duplainville Road in Pewaukee. So Andy, I don't understand why you're willing to use that as an exit, but not as an entrance to stay on Valley Road. So the Arrowwood subdivision site is not a short-term venture. Estimates are that over the next 7 years, the construction of 299 homes will take place there. There will be more concrete trucks, more lumber trucks, more dump trucks, more bulldozers, and a myriad of vehicles coming to and from that site to put homes on it. The city should be proactive, and I think the chief can appreciate that, proactive policing in discussions with the developer and their vendors and how to get supplies to this work site. Using Valley Road is an important step in keeping residents of Oconomowoc safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Bortz.
My name's Robert Bortz, and I live at 121 Monastery Hill Drive in the village of Lac La Belle. Where I'd like to start is I'm talking about Rockwell, and I think I'm uniquely qualified to speak on the project because I am in the corner unit right over here of the first and only development that Mr. Scrima has built in town. I would ask everyone to remember what was in that space before Fowler Lake Village was created. They were blighted houses. The grass was knee-high. All the houses across the street were bad. Currently, he's added a dozen businesses. I know what he's added to the tax rolls, but what I want to speak to is the quality of the building. I am an owner of that corner. That is where my company is with its 8 employees. And the building is of such quality because it was allowed to be in order for the development to proceed. As I understand it, the biggest wrinkle is the height. I'd also remind everyone that all of those historic buildings in downtown Oconomowoc replaced other buildings. And at the time they were built, they were state-of-the-art. Most have outlived their usefulness, especially the blighted properties that this project would replace. Also, I would like to speak to the quality of Mr. Skrima's management. I am a tenant. I built out the space. I had to call on him during the creation of the space. I've had to work with Jeff on the maintenance of the space since we've been there. This is our 3rd year. And he has been fantastic at referring qualified contractors and responding to the needs that we have for any sort of work that we need to be done. A developer should be held accountable for their results. And I think that everyone can agree that especially Fowler Lake Village is a reminder of the quality that we would be getting with Rockwell. Lastly, the space that is to the south of the building, which the Harrows own, and is blighted, and has been there a decade. And there's been a red herring thrown that there might be a food truck parked there. I don't believe it. But the space that Jeff owns with partners will look just like that for a decade if he's not allowed to build a project that has the quality that the community hopes for in that space. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Holmgren.
Mayor, Alderman, thank you so much. I haven't prepared anything to
Could you
speak
state
about.
your address
Oh,
first,
okay, I live
please?
at
That's okay.
547 LaBelle.
Thank you.
I moved to Oconomowoc 5 years ago because it was a lovely area. Since I've moved here, I've seen condo after condo after condo. It's ruining our city. It's ruining its character. And I'm dismayed that we are going to slap up another condo on the lake. I realize it's probably too late to do anything about that, but this condo is too high. It's too close to the shore, and it goes against things that you, as a group, agreed on. And I don't understand why you're backing off so we can have yet another condo. This condo over here isn't even full yet. We have a whole bunch going up at the Olympia range. How many condos do we want? Do we want to be a city of condos, or do we want to be a city for everyday American families? Thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing, the TIF. I don't want to pay for them to be able to make money. Our property was reassessed last year. It was reassessed again this year. And we now have an additional tax coming for the police and fire department. There's a limit to how much burden normal homeowners can take. My husband and I are senior citizens. If this continues, we won't be able to live in our house. And I'd like you to consider that when you're making us pay a TIF for a condo. Thank you.
Thank you. John Getteman.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. My name is John Gettyman. I live at 617 North Lake Road here on Fowler Lake. Been there for 34 years. My house just turned 100 years old, and so we invest a lot to keep it looking like it was originally built. I don't have any particular issues with the Rockwell development, but it is said that the best predictor of future performance is past performance. And that's why we check references, that's why resumes are important. And the Fowler Lake project over here, which I understand was developed by the same developer, to me, it baffles me how this council and this government could, in the same time frame, allow the type of projects we have over here on LaBelle, even Worthington Apartments, they're, even the frontage and everything else is attractive. They look good. In my personal opinion, this is an abomination over here. It's nothing like the pictures that were shown before it was built. I don't know how the city allowed that project to get built, especially from the rear. It looks like an industrial factory. You have you have concrete unfinished pillars just sitting out there with and concrete unfinished patios. It's cheap looking. When you compare that to the investment that your previous investors had put into the other developments around here, which I think you guys did a great job, I'm wondering, how did they fool you? What were you thinking? You know, I don't know if I have the exact quote from Mark Twain, but it says it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they were fooled. So you go forward, don't get fooled again. You've got to pony up to make sure if you're going to let this developer do this, you hold them to the architectural designs that you approve and nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Gibbs on a different topic.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say.
Yeah, I'll need to keep you for sure to 3 minutes this time,
This is going to
please.
be way less.
Okay.
Way less. I'll make up for last time. I know that there's talk about, blighting that property. I know that property's in, really bad shape. But also, I think that the price that was paid for that reflected it. They're buying the land. They're not buying, they're not buying the property. So, I think that whatever goes up is going to be fine, but I think it has to be really what everybody agrees on, height and also the boardwalks and the parking lot and the piers, and why are we providing a pier for a private building? I don't understand that. But the last building that's there, I know that building has not been part of this project, but it's also been maintained. It doesn't look blighted. I mean, it's been painted. I don't understand that. So while I think it's inconvenient to the project, I don't think that the city should interfere with private ownership of that property. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last blue card that I have. Do we have any other comments from the public before we move on? Any other further comments? Yes, ma'am? You can, but I would like you just to make sure you state your full name, address, and that's fine. I want to make sure you're heard. Diane, can you get that?
Okay, I too was not ready for tonight. I wanted to listen. However, here I come. Okay, my name is Sue Bartell. I live at 225 West 3rd Street in Oconomowoc. I'm one of those people that have been here forever and ever, amen, and will be. 2 weeks ago when I opened the paper and saw what the Rockwell building was going to look like, I thought, this is great. It has an old look to it. It just looked perfect. Well, then I started to read it. And then I thought, no, I agree. We don't need any more condos in this city. And then when I started to read further about the parking, it's like, no, wait a minute, you want underground parking, you need extra space to come out. And someone the other day had mentioned, okay, when they come out of that parking lot and they're gonna want to turn left, that's probably not gonna happen. And as people that have lived here forever realize that by the War Memorial, there used to be a U-turn. And I remember that as a kid as we were in high school, because you drive up to the Kilty, you'd come back, you'd turn around and you go back again. Now, there's no place to make a U-turn in this town anymore, which is probably not a big deal because I live 3 blocks away. But I like the look of it. It's a beautiful building. But again, don't take away from the lakefront for somebody's personal agenda. The other thing I got out of today is I should come to these meetings more often, because I heard a lot tonight that really kind of raised the hair on the back of my neck a little bit. And as far as, I'll just go with the Fowler thing right over here that was just discussed. Those houses that were blighted, well, those were thriving homes for a long, long time until somebody came in and decided, oh, let's buy them, and then we'll build something. Well, guess what? The people left. Things weren't tore down. Things were not built. Thus, there's your blight. That's all I have today to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay, we're going to move on in our agenda to our consent agenda items. I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, on to committee reports, personnel. Consider act on 2022 compensation revision to the employee handbook's compensation upon interim assignment policy for the interim city administrator and interim department heads. Mr. Posnick.
Good evening, Council. So we are proposing 2 changes to our interim assignment policy. This policy is part of the employee handbook. It's what we use to compensate our employees when filling in for a vacant position or a position on leave of absence. The 2 changes that we're proposing to the policy is one, to compensate, to increase the compensation to 25%, up from 10% for department head level positions and city administrator position. We need to pay a fair amount for the higher level work that they perform, the responsibilities that they're assigned to, and the hours that they work. And then the second change we want to do is make it effective after 10 days down from the 30 days that's there now. This would cover more of our leave of absences. We had a good conversation at personnel. We added in an extra line to the policy and a paragraph tonight in the memo tonight. So for employees to be eligible for the 25% interim department head pay, the city administrator must approve and appoint. If the interim department head is the city administrator, the mayor must approve, appoint, and notify the common council. And that was just a recent add due to the personnel. The financial impact estimated is $0 for the vacated position. The city saves a significant amount of money when the position is vacated. We do have situations, and there are very few, for leave of absences like a medical leave. The financial impact of that is to be reviewed before it's approved by the city administrator. So why 25%? When you add in the benefits, and I gave an example there, if it's a $100,000 department head position and it's vacated for 12 months, and I haven't seen that since I've been here, the goal is to fill the position. The proposed 25% would be $25,000. Even after the interim is paid the 25%, the city saves approximately $75,000 plus benefits. And then I thought, well, I should have added in the cost of the benefits, because this is where it really is interesting. $100,000 position, you add in the benefits, and if it's not filled for a whole year, the city actually saves $135,000. When you pay somebody 25%, you're paying them $25,000. The city's still saving way over 82% when you add in the value of the benefits. So it's worth it. The city saves a lot of money, and the employee gets the worth that they deserve for filling in for that vacated position. So our suggested motion is for the council to approve the revision to the compensation upon interim assignment policy as proposed, effective January 1st.
I'd like to open it up for council. Any questions for Mr. Posnick? Alderman Kavieski.
There are some positions that may be vacant that would require council confirmation. Yes?
Some positions that would be vacated. Oh, if, to hire, correct, yes.
Right. So the confirmation would still be required for the interim position under this policy?
For the interim, we need to move quicker, faster to go to that process. I mean, sometimes it's just a 2-week or a month. I mean, most of these assignments are less than 30 days, to 60 days. And that's why we put in that the mayor would educate and notify the common council at the time.
So as a follow-up question to that, let's say you have a director of DPW,
okay,
for example, that I think needs confirmation under this revision. That person could be put in that spot without confirmation and just notification of that temporary position, even though they're going to be performing for an extended period. Is there, I don't know if that's in the best interest of,
I understand your concern, so obviously the city administrator would be involved in that process. They're going to put the best person in that position, probably more, I mean, obviously council, I would hope would take that recommendation to heart, and I couldn't see council disagreeing with it unless for some reason politically they have an issue with the one individual, but we would put a very qualified person in that position. And obviously with the notification of the mayor, letting the council know, you could have that opportunity at the next council meeting to bring that up.
I'm just thinking from a process standpoint, if it's a position that normally would require the confirmation, I agree that most of the time, this is a short-term deal.
Right.
Maybe it's 2 weeks to maybe 90 days, hopefully, right? And notification would be fine, but over an extended period of time, I would like to consider some type of period of time that would then consider confirmation by the body as opposed to notification that this is what's happening.
Because, yeah, we do have those situations where, and it's very, like I said, if you look back in our history, I talked about it personnel, not very many, it doesn't happen very frequently.
Right.
But there are times where, hey, within 2 weeks, we got to somebody's got to step up and do it.
Yep.
So it needs to be assigned to someone, and then be able to take, and then if you want to go that route and take it away from them, yeah, I would think it'd be a performance issue, maybe something like that, but.
I wouldn't think it would be a taking away, just following process. You know,
Well, one comment to add to that, the best qualified people to select the interim are the people that work with them every day, not the council. And so that would be Tony, that would be our city administrator. Forget the people part of it. So I think your point is well taken. You don't want to have an open vacancy for a year, and then the council has no input on it. But really, most of those will happen from somebody internally that's going to take on that additional role. So I would argue that the way it's written gives that flexibility to a city administrator and our HR director to pick the best people, knowing who they are and what projects are in place and what resources need to be allocated there. And it's something that, you know, if it becomes an issue, you know, we have something else coming in the agenda in 2 weeks that will allow the council to say, hey, this person's been here for too long. I'd like to bring it back on the agenda for discussion. So I think those are some things that working for the last 2 years on operations with this group, they tried really, really hard to fill those positions. It's been a struggle recently because of the market. And I think we need to give them the flexibility to make that decision. And I think that if we as council get too involved, you don't have the whole picture of everything going on. But and maybe a compromise would be a go back to the personnel committee for discussion. That might be it, another approach, but that's up to you guys. Alderman Rozak.
I think you guys are two ships passing tonight on this issue. I think what Lou was talking about was there are I think 4 or 5 positions that are ordinance defined appointed roles that have to be appointed by you and approved by council. I don't think he's talking about the temporary DPW assistant director or, you know, the temporary deputy park and recs guy. I think he's talking about those principal positions that have to be appointed. I don't think this addresses that. I think what we should do is direct staff to look at that policy on these interim positions where we just plug someone in that is in a position that by ordinance and statute are defined and we have to appoint them. You have to appoint them, we have to approve them. I think those are the people you're talking about.
Right.
And they're very clearly statutorily defined roles. And we just have kind of arbitrarily said, well, they're interim for a period of time into perpetuity. And I think that's what you're talking about. That's not in this policy, but it's something I think we should look at, is maybe we allow that per policy or per resolution for some short period of time. After that, that person, whether they're interim or not, needs to be brought forward and approved. Right. And it's just, that's what it's defined in the ordinance. I mean, we're not talking about the assistant arborist at Park and Recs. Right, we're talking about those 4 positions that we have to approve after appointment by the mayor.
Correct.
Alderman Rozak, just to add to that, and I see where you're going with it. If you approve the next thing I'm trying to ask for, hopefully we won't have a long vacant position in the future.
Exactly.
So typically it's 90 days. I mean, usually, it's been a little challenge to fill the city administrator and DPW, but usually we're moving fast to fill it.
Yeah.
But
Fair enough.
And for the community, there's another item coming forward to try to give us more competitive advantage in hiring. That's what was referenced here. Alderman Kavieski.
Alderman Rozak has summarized that well. And maybe it is that 90-day point that would then require those positions that typically would statutorily require confirmation just to be confirmed. And I wouldn't see any council at that point not confirming somebody that's already in that, but we'd be following our policy. And I think this council looks at policy seriously. So if by policy that position should be confirmed, it should stay a confirmation even in the interim if it's past 90 days.
Yeah, I would agree that knowing past history and everything, that 90 days is a good number. It allows the staff to move quickly and put people in place when need to be. Allows the council that if it does extend out to then have a say in that. So we can add in that wording that those positions that are normally appointed and approved by council would have interim designation for 90 days, and after that would need council approval.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
So if we're going to do that, do we propose those changes tonight, or will we approve this with the understanding that we give you direction to make those changes?
If you're comfortable with that direction, I would recommend someone make a motion to include that change. But that's up to you guys. Alderman Mulder.
Sorry, speaking without waiting for my turn. This doesn't feel like the place to make that. Because this is talking about the compensation level for people, not whether or not they need approval. Wouldn't that?
So there's two things that are happening here. So if a department head leaves or has FMLA or some situation, and we have to put somebody into a department head position temporarily, under what we're reading here tonight, the city administrator could appoint those person to that position. We do have a handful of department heads that by ordinance have to be approved by council if the mayor makes an appointment. So
I understand that, but is the compensation upon interim assignment policy really the right place to talk about whether or not we have to approve someone to hold that interim position? That's not what we're discussing. We're discussing the compensation level, not
Should be a
approval
different,
level.
within a different ordinance.
It's a different ordinance.
Tony, do you have comments on that? What is your
I
suggestion?
mean, my suggestion is you could write it in this policy because this is what we're going to reference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it'd just be easy to keep it in one spot.
it's what drives that action is the vacant.
Sure. I guess I think it should appear in the ordinance where it discusses that those people need to be approved by the council, and it should say, on that ordinance, it should say, should that position be vacated for more than 90 days, the interim person must be approved by council as well, not within this documentation where it's purely about compensation.
So we can bring back that ordinance change for that part of the ordinance if that's what the council would like.
It feels like we're sticking it in here because we're talking about it right now. It doesn't seem to have any logical
Oh, you're correct.
place in here.
Douglas?
I'm going to shift gears to compensation. The one thing, I guess, that's jumped out to me is that we're looking at back paying people to January 1st of '22. I would like to see it on approval of this going forward. So that we don't have to look at how many different people were technically in an interim position for over 10 days in the last 6 months. It's just, once this is approved, going forward, not backdating this.
Let me respond to that. There is one position. And
where?
Sorry, Mark.
So, I want to just give you, Jace, just an idea whether you guys want to decide, just so you have the full facts on this. So for the DPW director position, we've paid $5,277 to date for Mark to fill in for the position. After taxes, it's not much for him. The city, as of to date, has saved $71,485 with benefits. So in the private sector, if somebody's basically filled in into this kind of position, maybe there'd be a bonus for him. You know, we don't have that. We have this dollar amount. So he'd be the only one affected by it. To up it to 25%, you're not talking that much, and the city saved a lot of money for it. It's just, to me, it just feels like we're, I mean, I get what you're saying to go this way forward. We're only talking one person. We hardly have paid him for the role that he's done. So it's just my 2 cents in terms of
And to remember, he was interim since last fall.
It's not much.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
I'm in support of doing this retroactively back to January 1st. Just quick calculation, so the 5277 that you said is based on the 10%. So if we're retroactively going back and awarding him the 25%,
You're just
then,
paying them the difference.
correct? What?
You're just paying them the
Right,
difference.
About
right.
$7,500
But I
is
mean,
what I'm.
right, so 12,500 would be the 25% minus the 5,000, right?
He was better at math, yeah.
So I'm looking for direction from Council. Alderman Rozak.
Yeah, I'm okay with the 25% policy. I agree with Alderman Douglas. No offense to Mark. Mark took the,
Untaken.
yeah, and Mark and I talked about this before the meeting. I told him I had a concern with retroactively doing this in any type of policy where we're talking about pay. He took the job knowing that he was gonna have to be interim and that his job was also to find the interim guy and hire the next guy. And whether that's hard to do or not, that's where he was at. You know, he knew it was 10% at the time. I think this is a great policy moving forward. I think the 25% is fair. Arbitrarily saying we're gonna go back on this one time and do it, I don't think that that's correct. And I think he's getting the next section is a big pay bump also for all our director heads, which includes Mark as well. So I agree with Alderman Douglas, and I would make a motion to approve it, the policy as stated, except not make any retroactive provision back to January.
Even if bonuses are given after the fact, I'm just saying.
Bonuses are, now what are you talking?
No, but we don't give bonuses, but that typically is how it works in the private sector,
Well, that's not true.
right? I mean,
No, that's not true
they
at
don't give
all.
you a bonus up front. Oh, maybe sometimes they do.
Sometimes you
But a
fill
lot of
role-
times you get it at the end of a year,
No.
end of a performance.
No, sometimes you fill a role and you don't get a bonus for anything. You just got to fill the role until the next guy's
No, oh, I agree with that, but I'm
You
just
don't
saying.
get an extra bonus necessarily. It's you got to fill the role.
Right, but I'm talking about bonuses when they are awarded.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
1 second.
So we're voting on the motion right now, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Nay.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Moving on to consider act on pay grade adjustments for city positions below market value. Mr. Posnick.
All right, thank you to personnel. We had a big discussion on this, so I'll just kind of summarize, and I know I've talked to some of you about this as well. So as you may know, over the last 2 years, the job market has been very challenging. These challenges, concerns include a high demand for employees and shortage of qualified applicants. Obviously, Western Lakes is going through this. A lot of other people are going through this. The latest wage data is higher, and our past cost of living adjustments haven't kept up. We do have some concerns on leadership turnover coming up over the next 4 or 5 years. We expect some of our high-level department head positions to leave, and we need to make sure those wages are in place so when we go to recruit, we are able to attract some quality candidates. The private sector is becoming more attractive for comparable positions, and then obviously we've actually experienced a lot of this because of our latest recruitment challenges in finding qualified candidates. So to ensure that the city maintains its ability to attract, motivate, and retain employees, market wage study of city wages is due. At Personnel Committee, we discussed this, the cost of having compensation consultant or use in-house data as presented. So I went forward and did this and give you guys an idea what we're looking at and what I would recommend for changes. I use the same comparables, very similar comparables, use the same processes as our compensation consultants have done in the past. Flip my page here. So the results and recommendations of what I have found versus you guys going out and hiring a compensation consultant, because I think we'd be in close agreement. The majority of our city positions currently are market competitive. We've done a crew market study back in 2019, which helped, and council approved that, so thank you. That helped us keep our wages competitive there. A lot of our admin positions, clerical positions, they're all in pretty good shape. If I put out a job ad today, I'd probably get 20, 30 applicants of qualified people, so I'm not concerned there. My concern is for a lot of these city positions, we still have to keep a good competitive COLA going forward, so that's how we would take care of those positions. I did identify 19 positions that needed to be adjusted and 2 to be fixed. And in your handout packet there, all those positions are identified. With those changes, we would establish pay grade 21. This would be to accommodate the utility manager and city administrator higher pay, and that is due to market. The next step here, we would place the utility manager and the city administrator in this grade 21 at step 6. For the other positions, we would place them in the grade, and this is similar how we've done it in the past. They'd go up a grade, and then they'd be placed in a step that's closest to their wage with a decent increase, so that they at least get something for being elevated. This recommendation is, or this study is more about putting people in the proper grade. If they're placed below a step or where they should be, that can be addressed at the performance evaluation, which we discussed at personnel. The two fixes I had in there were the part-time city clerk. She was basically hired as a seasonal. She's working on a permanent part-time basis, so she should get the administrative pay. And then our library pages, it's not much, but they're paid $7.75 an hour. The market is $9 an hour for these people. The effective date we're proposing is for July 2022. The financial impact, the estimated cost for 6 months is $58,000, with $34,000 coming from the general fund and $24,000 from the utilities for 6 months remaining in 2022. The $34,000 would be paid for using budgeted contingency funds. The 2020 contingency fund is $149,000. Using the prior unused levy dollars placed in contingency fund in 2022, it will be designated to wages for 2022 and for subsequent years. This allows us to be wage competitive without any tax increases. So with that, our suggested motion is to approve the pay grade adjustments for the positions listed above as proposed, effective beginning first check in July 2022.
So I'd like to open up for discussion. Alderman Douglas.
First off, Tony, I'd like, thanks for putting this together. We had a long discussion that day, where I stayed after for a while. I think, personally, I don't think we need to go to the outside. I think you did a good study, used good comparables across the area. I don't see an issue with that. The one thing we did talk about was there's the opportunity for people when they're going up grade scales that they can actually put in for a higher grade scale at their request to their supervisor if they feel they should be going up higher. Is that correct?
Correct. There's the position reclassification that's due every year, and then for performance evaluations, if they feel as a result of the study they were placed at too low of a step, then we would visit that at performance evaluation time when their eval is due.
Thank you.
Alderman Kavieski.
During that meeting, there was discussion that that opportunity would be brought to those people impacted by what we're looking to pass, before it came to us, just in case they felt no and know now that they aren't at the right step in the right grade. Was this brought to all of the employees that are going to be impacted by this with the opportunity to come before us with the correct dollar amount that you're looking for? So this isn't passed and their evaluation is done 2 months from now and the accelerated step is brought forward and additional dollars are needed to compensate them?
So I make sure I understand you correctly. So when we do this, we've put it all together. Everybody's had an opportunity. The department has the chance to look at it. I don't run out to the employees and say, until I know that we're going to give them a step increase, that we know this is going to go through. They are aware of it. They have access to looking it up. We talked to all the department heads, and their job is to educate the staff. But no, I haven't directly myself gone out to the staff and say, I'm going to get you, trying to get you in a higher. This is about the positions going to a higher grade. It's not about the individual.
Well, they know where they're going to be in regards to grade and step right now, right?
Correct. They know where their grade and step is right now.
And they were told that, were they told that if they didn't feel like that was the right grade and step for them based on their term of service and their qualifications, that they could come to you and say, hey.
Well, we just talked about that. I mean, at personnel, right?
Right. So
in this study right now, and Lou, I'm just being careful because if I present it to everybody, everybody's going to come to my office and say they want to be put in a higher step.
Sure.
I mean, it'll be.
Well, anybody
it's already
could,
happening. So just so
right.
you know, you're aware. So for this position, there's about 3 people that are below market. Market is it's actually a great place to be, even if you're an experienced person. So we're putting you right at market where you should be, which is our step 6. There's 3 positions that are going to be below step 6, and those people, I would reach out to them and let them know they have the opportunity if they feel they would want to put in for an accelerated step. But that's between them and their supervisor, because there could be a performance issue or something else that we would want to address at that time.
Well, again, the only reason I ask that isn't to encourage the dam on to get broken and have that flood come through.
Right.
But I just want to make sure that those employees that feel they may be at a grade A, step B, and they weren't put there, and they come to you during that performance evaluation and say, hey, here's my case. And you're like, yeah, you're probably right. You know, we'll do an accelerated step.
Right.
We'll get you to where you need to be. And now all of a sudden, we're short from the one-time adjustment we're about to do for the rest of the year. I'd rather have it done now than
They can address it.
through the process.
We're doing what we can afford, to be honest, at this point. And we want the opportunity to look at it, the individual's performance as well. So I don't want to guarantee it, that we can do it, but that's why we have that accelerated step policy written in the employee handbook, so they can go out and ask for it.
Alderman Rozak.
I mean, I think this is a good policy. We're increasing the pay. We're creating some additional steps. We're giving people an opportunity to move up in grades, move up in pay, to keep them competitive. We're moving just about everyone to what we believe is the market rate. This is a gutsy thing for Tony to do because he has to work out here and he has to defend what he's presented and what people are going to be put into. So I applaud you. I'm glad that you were able to save us $35,000 instead of having to hire a consultant to do that. So that's huge. Two real quick questions. One, it may be more of a comment. My understanding, I talked to Lori briefly today, the unused levy dollars that have been placed in contingency for 2022 are essentially going to be gone doing this, and or we use them for the next year or two, and that's fine. We just should be aware of what we're doing with that money, and I think that's the right decision. I've been always a pretty big proponent of paying people what they're worth. So I think we have really good city directors. I think they do a good job. I think we have a well-run city, and we have to pay people what they're worth or they leave. And we've done a lot of step increases, whether it's COLAs and other things for the kind of the line employees, and I think this is good for the director level, so I'm in favor of it. It is going to be an increase in cost, and we need to be aware of this when we're doing our budget cycle this year, that there may be other areas we need to cut to keep our employees. I mean, we're service-oriented, right? So this expense is like kind of our number one thing is people, whether it's police officers, whatever. The only other thing I'll note is, do you believe this is absolutely critical to do it in the middle of the year, or should we wait till January 1st and a whole new budget cycle? I'm just curious, because for instance, I mean, we're working on a referendum for the fire department. If that passes, those firefighters and paramedics and those folks don't get a pay increase until January 1st. And those are a huge chunk of city people, city workers, you know, kind of through Western Lakes.
So I can jump in and help you on that.
Sure.
I would strongly recommend you take action either for or against it now. It is something that has had a lot of analysis. It is what we can afford, and it isn't going to increase our taxes. The challenge we've had is when we've had a department head leave or potential retirements, we need a pay grid where we can go out and actually place ads.
Be competitive, yeah.
And be competitive. And so for a few weeks, we couldn't even place an ad because we knew what we had was not competitive. So the timing, I think, is critical to do it. I can be very blunt that it's not a perfect solution what we've done, but it's fiscally responsible for what we can afford at this time.
Okay.
Alderman Kavieski.
I would agree, time is right to do it. Not ideal, but it is needed now. And if, you know, we talk about private sector was able to address this much quicker. So it's prudent to get the talent we need for the balance of the year to do it now.
Alderman Mulder.
So there's a pretty consistent step from grade 6 to 20 of about, the midpoint's about $7,000 per step. So we go 20 to 21, and there's a significant jump of 32,000. Would it make any sense to make that grade 25 and leave room in there for, because you may need to create additional buckets between 20 and 21 with a midpoint between 168 and 136. So at this point, you're leaving yourself no room between those two to add additional ones should the market demand it.
It's a big number.
So you could go, the new grade could be 25, which is at this level. That would still allow the $7,000 steps between them or.
And have
roughly.
other grades, just have them be open.
Other grades
Yeah,
in there that would
I
be
did
open.
originally have one in there, but everybody going, why is nobody in that stuff, in that grade? But we could easily create it, yeah.
That's a
It
good
just-
idea.
Mhm.
You probably would have to do it down the road if you don't do it now, so.
Right, okay.
Great. Like to entertain a motion?
You gonna amend?
Yeah.
No, you should amend that to do that.
Okay,
Yeah. Or make the motion with the
all right.
amendment.
So I'll move that we amend the motion to create a new grade of grade 25, and then create new grades of 21 through 24 that step up appropriately to grade 25.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Okay, well done. Tony, any other questions? Okay, let's move on.
Is that just on the motion?
Call everybody aye.
Vote on the motion, or did we vote on both?
I think there was a motion to amend, just amendment.
We need to vote on
Is that right? Okay, okay.
I'll move to approve the wage scale adjustment then based on based on the amendment and what's been presented.
And I'm seconding. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I can't get that in there now. 1 second.
Sorry for the confusion.
No, that's okay.
Alderman Shell Pepper who left.
He'll be back, he said if he needed to, you could skip him.
Did he say that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And that
So
was-
on the record, Alderman Shell Pepper said to go ahead if he was not back in time.
And Matt Rozak moved that.
And I second it, Ellis. Call roll, please.
Okay. Alderman Shell Pepper. Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
I'd like to entertain a motion and to consider act on Resolution 22-R3040, granting renewal of the 2022 to 2023 alcohol beverage licenses.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Ellis.
Any further discussion on this? This is an annual renewal, folks, that has been reviewed in committee prior to the meeting. Call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper. Still here. Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder. Okay, let me mark those off.
We know if they're coming back, or
There's stuffs here.
are they coming back?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Let's move
carried.
on to consider act on Resolution 22-R3045, approving the electric budget amendment for the outage management funds.
Hi, thank you.
This item takes 6 votes.
Yep, so yeah, this item will end up taking 6 votes for approval.
Yeah, so if you want to, this has been discussed in committee, if you want to do the presentation, I think that would be great.
Sure.
And any discussion, but we will need to wait because this needs a supermajority vote.
So I can start.
Go ahead,
with, I
Lucas.
guess, For the background, the utilities have been working since 2019 in order to build a solid GIS mapping system on the foundation of Esri so that we can work to combine all of our softwares that we have to help better track all of our assets and do utility locating, things of that nature. And as this project progresses, different opportunities arise, and we find new ways to help implement them. Currently, right now, the process we use helps track our lead lateral replacement program. It helps do our Diggers Hotline 811 tickets out in the field. It's just continuing to improve. So far this year, we have spent basically all of our budget that we have, so we're looking for our budget amendment to continue that. A lot of the things earlier this year came into things of figuring out our servers and investigating resolutions for all those. On the second page of the memo, it kind of outlines the items that we're looking for the payments for, and then the funds to fulfill those obligations for the rest of the year in the tune of about $260,000. So I'll open it up for questions and comments.
So I'd like to open us for council for any questions or comments for Lucas. Alderman Kavieski.
With this, it has zero tax, or levy tax implications that comes out of the utility. I think it's just good for,
Yep, that is correct. It'll come out of the the electric utilities reserve funds.
Like to entertain a motion, please?
Rozak, so moved.
second, Kavieski.
Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
With respect, do we need to take a break, or is everybody good to move forward?
I think, I personally think a 5-minute break would be a good idea.
Okay, at this point, we're going to take a
Second that.
5-minute break to give us a breather here, and we'll be back at 9:37 sharp.
Get some more water.
Item is consider act on Resolution 22-R3043 for the Wisconsin DNR Compliance Maintenance Annual Report, CMAR, for the 2021 wastewater operations. Mr. Freeber.
Good evening. What you got today before you is the basically report card for the wastewater treatment plant for 2021. This basically starts out with the wastewater coming into the plant, the wastewater leaving the plant, the biosolids that we haul out in the farmers' fields, our staffing, our certification, and our financial, and then it ends up with our collection system. It takes a look at everything that the testing that we do as the water comes in, the water goes out, make sure that we're following the permit compliance so that you guys know that we're in compliance continuously. So when they finish up doing the upgrade or the grading of this, when we answer the questions and we take our lab data and stuff, the grades comes back as straight A's again for, I don't know how many years, but quite a few years in the past.
Thank you and congratulations.
Thanks. My team, not me.
Any questions for Mr. Freeber or comments? Alderman Rozak.
Very brief, Kevin, thanks a lot. Kevin, thanks a lot. Your group does a great job. I've complimented you many years in a row on the straight A's. We went into a little bit more detail in the utility on the program, and we had a couple other questions, but otherwise it looks great. Thanks a lot. It's what cities are supposed to do, right? There's always like a mission creep with government, but this is a key service, right? Police, fire, water, protection. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing. When we do stuff outside of the bounds of that, we're getting outside of what our constituents want us, I believe, to do. So this is a key thing, and being able to provide that service to the city at such a high level is huge. Thank you.
Alderman Kavieski.
For the record, congratulations. It is not a once in a while thing. It is an every year thing, and that takes a high level of focus and dedication by your team and by the leader of the department and you, which is you this time. So most people don't think about it. They use it, and it does what it's supposed to do.
It's supposed to go.
It goes where, yeah, all the good things happen. So thank you very much.
All right.
I'd like to entertain a motion on this resolution.
So moved, Ellis.
Second, Altman Cloth.
Any further comments or questions? Call roll, please.
Alderman Shellpepper.
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
On to new business, consider act on Resolution 22-R3046, declaring the North Main Street redevelopment project area as blighted. Mr. Duffy.
Good evening. Let me pop this up on May 17th. This body directed this Community Development Authority to investigate the North Main Street properties, establish boundaries, and investigate it and make a blight determination as required by the statute. As I have done in the past, because I think it's important to educate people on how this works as it relates to the state statute, we will have that little overview to share with you tonight. The definition of blight is an area in which predominance of buildings or improvements by reason of dilapidation, deterioration, age, or obsolescence is detrimental to the public and general welfare. It's also an area where the deterioration of structures or improvements substantially impairs or arrests the sound growth of the community. As you well know, we have multiple plans that we as an organization and you as a body behold as part of your goals to continue to move the community forward. Role of the CDA is to designate boundaries of the project area and submit those boundaries to you, the legislative body. That is what we're doing this evening. We do need a 2/3 vote on that. We'll talk about the resolution. Future steps are preparing a plan and conducting a public hearing, which we'll talk about the timeline to do that based on your consideration today. Your role ultimately is declaring that area blighted. This is the final decision-making authority, not the Community Development Authority. I would share that with you because, again, anything that they do is only by direction of this body.
And again, those things, as we continue to move forward, related to a redevelopment plan and those documents prepared, will come back to you for those decisions as well. This is the project area identified. It is 4 parcels, 3 of which are owned by the development group, 1 of which is an alleyway owned by the city of Oconomowoc. That is the area of those existing conditions. As we reviewed the blight statute and the conditions that exist in the area. Part of that process and part of as I continue to move forward, upon your consideration and direction this evening, and if we move to preparing a redevelopment plan, we need to take a look at the existing context. So I'll share that as it relates to land use, zoning, as well as the existing property conditions in a matrix that meets the state statute. So this is the existing land use as part of your plan to be consistent, mixed use commercial, office and residential. So this area currently is that. Whatever we would propose in the future would be consistent with those uses as well as zoning from a mixed use commercial standpoint. So those are consistent. This existing conditions, and the CDA reviewed the report that was, the complete report that was prepared, identified a lack of upkeep of maintenance, dilapidated facades, there's actually awnings falling apart, the complete deterioration of improvements in the rear, accumulation of debris, primarily in rear sections of the building, some of which has been cleaned up by the owners now. Obviously vacant buildings, and lastly, inadequate and unsafe electrical systems and water damage in those buildings, which make them difficult to occupy at this time. Based on that determination and the statute requirement, we need to make a determination as it relates to the percentage of property within the boundary that meets the statutory definition of blight. Those are the 4 parcels, 3 of which are the buildings. The vacant piece of property serves as an alley, goes into a computation of the total acreage of the area and the total area that meets 1 or more definitions of blight related to statute, of which all 3 of them do, which equates to 83% of the property within the redevelopment boundary meets that statute definition of blight in accordance with the state statute. Lastly, we talked about electrical. I think this is important as people continue to talk about the buildings. This is actually through our conversations with the owner, and becomes that component of the electrical system. This is actually a termination notice of the insurance on those properties related to the after review of inspection. There are specific breakers and fuses that are unacceptable as an electrical system and interior water damage, and they were not going to renew the insurance for these buildings, which wouldn't allow them to be occupied as well as an indication of blight. So as the role of the CDA and the Economic Development Director, on behalf of the city, the conditions exist in the area to justify a finding of blight in accordance with the Blight and Elimination of Slum Clearance Act, which is the statutory reference there, and are asking by resolution to designate the area a blighted area for the purpose of carrying out a plan of redevelopment and blight elimination prevention. Similar statutory words that were in your original resolution. In order to eliminate those blighting influences, encourage private investment. That's why we'd be passing that resolution and directing, again, the Community Development Authority to, 1, use their powers to establish a redevelopment plan consistent with removing those blighting influences. So here's where, this is kind of the timeline we've been. The CDA did adopt that resolution recommended to you. We have set a public hearing as part of that CDA meeting as it relates to continuation of the process. I think we shared this on May 17th as well. This evening, your consideration, 2/3 vote for the blight resolution, indicating the area is in need of blight elimination. We would have a public hearing on the 21st of June. That it will be published Thursday and is scheduled for June 21st. And if the council so chooses, consideration potentially of the adoption of that redevelopment plan that is presented at the public hearing that same evening as discussed at previous meetings. So after that point, the city council, the CDA has the authority to certify the redevelopment plan. That becomes an important component as it relates to the conversation or future conversations related to creation of a TIF district for this area and a public-private partnership. With that, questions?
Alderman Mulder.
Could you, sorry, just the second time through this process, and in the redevelopment plan, what is all included in that, specific items that we need the majority or the supermajority on?
As it relates to the redevelopment plan?
The redevelopment plan, yes.
Okay.
I understand the blight.
Yes, you will.
You do.
Yep.
So,
So the redevelopment plan will outline, so what it'll do is it'll outline the existing conditions. It'll outline what potential public improvements we would be seeking as it relates to it. If we want to be so specific, and again, we did this with Olympia Fields, right? We actually had an idea of a plan. We inserted that to be able to take a look at it and use that as a format, be able to move forward and create ultimately those elements and those project elements, public improvements, site development requirements, site development assistance, all those components are outlined in that document and ultimately can become and inserted as part of a tax incremental financing district project plan, of which is a separate document approved by this body.
Alderman Kavieski.
Can you go back to the summary of the percentage of blight? The reason I thank you. The reason I wanted to kind of review this is there were some public comments made about Follow Lake Village and the team associated with that. Having somebody come in, purchase property, allow it to become blight as opposed to, you know, buying property that needs help and have a vision for it. This property, these buildings, I think 3 years ago, we wouldn't have thought to be in this position for a potential development, let alone this kind of scale of development. The condition of this position of these buildings hasn't been great for a long time, right? I mean, they've been functional, but they haven't been a gem. And I mean that in no derogatory manner. I went to AJ's fairly regular. But the electrical service, the costs associated with that, having Schulte there, having that business pass hands and moving out of there, all of that kind of set the stage for this. It wasn't bought and allowed to sit for 10 years while it became blighted. And I mentioned that because the conversation that was initiated or the statements made about Pleasant Street and where that was, I don't think that was the intent there either. I think 2008 happened around that time that prohibited some of that development from moving forward. And I don't believe Jeff Screama, who is involved in presenting this particular project, was part of that project up until at the point where he was brought in to sell the condo units. He's not part of that. So again, just, I know this project has some in favor of it and some not in favor of it. If you're not in favor of it or in favor of it, make those decisions based on fact, all right? So if you don't like Jeff because of what you see at Follow Lake, it's not his project. He was tasked with selling that and ensuring it was successful, and I believe it's sold out. So past performance should be an indicator of future performance. I think this project, if it moves forward, would be successful. One of the reasons I ran and wanted to represent this community and my family and my kids and keeping them here was to keep this community vibrant and to keep my kids with a high desire of living here. The downtown redevelopment has been extremely successful and creating energy and a sense of community with events and all kinds of other fun things. This, this will add to that, I believe. If you do something smaller in scale here, again, I believe it's blighted. We're gonna move in the right direction in the downtown. With the public amenities, this was talked about last fall. This body was the one that gave the developer the direction for what public amenities we thought the community would like to see there for public benefit. So it wasn't the developer coming before us and saying, hey, I'm gonna do something here and I'm gonna hold you hostage. I mean, there's been all kinds of verbiage associated with that, and that's not the deal. Again, so I just wanted to review the blight isn't because it's sat there for 10 years because this developer wanted to see money from the city. The developer itself isn't the same as what's on Pleasant Street with Fall Lake Village. And hopefully as this continues to move forward, people's questions will be answered with the right information.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
I want to thank everybody who contacted me on both sides of this issue. And believe me when I say that I listened on both sides. I don't want to keep beating this drum, but being in District 1, this was the biggest complaint that I got. And I don't think that the buildings there are redeemable, sadly. You know, I wish at times that we can refurbish things, but I don't think these buildings are redeemable. I do think we have an opportunity now to do something special with that project. What that is and what that entails as far as the bulk of it or the height of it will still be determined, but I will support blading the area.
Alderman Rozak.
Bob, real brief, what was the CDA vote on this?
Well, unanimous.
Okay, so
I
it's
think
all.
I think we had 5 of the 7 members in attendance.
So the CDA is also partially appointed, they're all appointed, but also there's a member on there from our city council, and they looked at this and agreed. I agree with your blight determination. Those buildings, like Karen said, are, I think, at this point unredeemable, and I don't think it's through any action of Rockwell. They've been in bad shape, I think, for a long time, and it's been a little bit of a spot where you walk by, you're like, wow, you know, they're gonna paint this? Are they gonna do anything with this? And this gives us an opportunity to do that and create that plan, so I thank you for your efforts, Bob.
I'd like to entertain a motion.
So move, Kavieski.
Second, Ellis.
Any further discussion, comments from council? Call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper,
Nay.
Alderman Kavieski,
Aye.
Alderman Douglas,
Aye.
Alderman Rozak,
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth,
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg,
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
On to our next item, which is consider act on Rockwell Partners Project Overview Agreement for the North Main Street redevelopment. Mr. Duffy.
Sure, this is obviously Rockwell Partners is proposing to redevelop these lands within North Main Street, redevelopment area we've just talked about. They've approached the city with a request that we consider the formation of a tax incremental financing agreement, as well as a public-private partnership related to this, to facilitate that project. We've, again, as was indicated, there's been continued dialogue between the council, the developer, and staff to be able to help facilitate a redevelopment at this site. Really, this project overview is intended to outline the general parameters of the project, the understanding of the parties' respective roles, if the project gains final approval by the council moving forward. So Attorney Riffle prepared this document. The developer has reviewed the document. Their legal has reviewed that document. So again, doesn't create any direct obligations, but it's a statement of good faith based on our dialogue, our negotiations, and the direction we potentially might see going forward related to realizing a redevelopment on North Main Street in downtown Oconomowoc.
And for the community, this is a non-binding memorandum of understanding. And it's trying to help the developers say, hey, we're going to move forward and start investing more in different designs and different options. So it's giving them some confidence that this is something that the council wants to continue to look at and to move forward at some level. It is not a commitment that we're going to build something exactly the way you've heard over the last several weeks. Alderman Rozak.
Well, without revealing anything that we discussed in closed session, but acknowledging that there are potentially other funds the city may have available, I think there's some benefit to adding some language to this MOU under the third bullet point on page 2 where it says the city would. I would propose, and I'll just throw this out for discussion, then I can make the full motion at some later point. Issue the $4.670 million municipal revenue obligation as TID contribution and/or include funds from other city sources. So we do have other city sources available, such as park impact fees, funds we set aside for village green restrooms. We have millions and millions of dollars in unfunded and unallocated reserves. So there are other potential funding sources to keep this TIF number as low as possible. And things that we've earmarked for other projects, right? To continue the improvements of Village Green and continue that vision. So I would just throw that out there as another discussion point because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion on this.
So I'd like to open it up for more discussion. Alderman Kavieski.
With that change in the verbiage, we had a gentleman come up and say that he may look at purchasing that space and working something out with the city that would be included in this type of verbiage? Or that would be something different? Because that would take...
That was a
That
comment
has
from a
nothing to
random...
do it.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's a different aspect. This is basically a memorandum of understanding saying this is what we feel that we're committing to at this point in time, but there's still a lot of work to do.
just a follow-up, because I wasn't here for the closed session discussion. But if one of the things in the TID that's identified for public infrastructure is that community warming house space. So if that's no longer part of
It
the
could
TID,
adjust what
it could
public
adjust.
improvements would be.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Okay.
Alderman Ellis. I come to you.
Okay, so one of the biggest things that I felt for myself is a big question is the height of the buildings. And I have a question. I'll just come out. I'll just throw it out there. Is it a deal breaker if this council says, we don't want 80 feet, we want 60 feet, we want 50 feet? Is that a deal breaker? Yes or no?
So you may address the council, Mr. Skrima.
I don't need a 40-minute dissertation. I need a yes or a no.
It is a deal breaker, given what we presented to you this last month and what you have in the presentation booklet. When we came to you back in November, we specifically asked what public improvements you were interested in, and then we scaled the building to create an assessment that would support that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Spiegelberg.
Well, he touched on it a little bit, but I was wondering at what point are we able to direct or give the input that we talked about in closed session? I mean, this is a non-binding memorandum of understanding. If we approve this, at what point are we coming back and giving redirection to the developers to go back and address some of the items that we talked about?
What we have on the floor is this non-binding referendum that we agreed upon that we'd bring forward to either vote forward or against. Now, you can make amendments to that at this point in time, but because it's a non-binding referendum, there are opportunities to change things down the road. But what we have to vote on is what we put on as an agenda item, which is this agenda item. But what has been proposed so far for discussion is what Alderman Rozak has brought up. Other things can be proposed as well to add to this specific document.
I'd like to make a recommendation.
A recommendation or a motion or what do
Motion,
you?
excuse me, a motion.
I'd like to hold off for a second. I will come back to you. Is there any other discussion items before a motion is put out there? I just want to make sure. We had a lot of discussion. We want to be careful in those discussions. I just want to make sure for the public, if there's a comment you want to make. Alderman Douglas.
So I guess my question is this non-binding referendum. If we pass this, we're basically telling them that go forward with essentially making this kid at, 4.6 million, but then later we're gonna tell them potentially, we don't want the height, we don't want the setback. So isn't that kind of giving them a different direction of what we might be talking about?
Yes.
So
Alderman Rozak.
So what we've got in front of us is a term sheet. Stan drafted it. My understanding it's non-binding. It's essentially a memorandum of understanding / term sheet that outlines a general obligations. There's going to be a developer's agreement that's going to outline in 2 weeks all of the very specific portions of this project, much more in detail. So you could, if you don't want the project at all, you could vote against it. If you want to amend it, you can.
Right.
They still would have to come back and say, yeah, we're okay with that term sheet or not. And if we were to amend something, so let's say we put in something that says you got to paint the building orange, okay, because we really love orange. They're going to say, no, we're not painting the building orange. It's over with, okay? So if you make an amendment to the term sheet now that changes their obligations, it could be over with tonight on this vote. So that's what we're up against. It doesn't mean you can't make changes later on to the developer's agreement or in negotiations after the term sheet either, because we've done that in other projects. We did general MOUs and term sheets with almost all the developers we've had TIFs with to kind of move the process to the next step.
If you look at it from both sides of the coin, the developer wants to have and say, hey, are you interested in moving this forward? That's really what this is, and here are some of the parameters. Within a couple of weeks, those parameters are going to be better defined for you guys to vote on, is really the direction. Alderman Spiegelberg, and then I'll come on.
I think myself and other aldermen who are speaking for individuals that are not crazy about the 5 feet want to know what is the fail-safe or direction that at the point that we can give them? Like, what is that point then if we vote yes to go forward with this?
You say yes to go forward to this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that final decision will be in 2 weeks with the developer's agreement. Alderman,
No, we don't have a developer's agreement started yet.
For some time.
We will have to
that
do
we
a
will. You're
developer's
right. That's the
agreement,
wrong
but
time.
we don't have one started
Bob, can you
yet.
help us with the timing? That's why we have you.
Well.
Sorry, I misspoke.
Again, I mean, this project, we've had a lot of conversations. Obviously, they're going to want to design a building based on what you want to see. Ultimately, the developer's agreement isn't dealt with until we get through Plan Commission approval.
Right.
So again, we're kind of in that interesting wedge of what do we want? How does it affect?
What's the vote next? What's the vote in 2 weeks?
That is the redevelopment plan, which is the blight component, which can be, basically becomes the project plan elements of a TIF district.
Alderman Shellpepper.
Yeah, okay, it's a non-binding agreement, memorandum of understanding, but I don't think you can vote for it in good faith tonight, knowing you want to change it if you don't agree with it. I mean, you should be upfront with the community, with the developer, with everybody. If you don't agree with it, you vote against it. Because if you do agree with it, or if you don't agree with it and you vote to move it forward now, this is just going to be like the 5 things listed: the public, bathrooms, warming house, blah blah blah. Council said we wanted these things on, therefore they're on. It's moving in that direction, and so just be honest with yourself, be honest with the community, be honest with Rockwell Project.
And that's what they're asking for. Alderman Kavieski.
So, to Alderman Shellpepper's point, if you aren't in support of the 70 feet, would now be the time to tell the developer that you're only comfortable with 60 feet and to take out whatever public infrastructure is associated with creating the increment that would drive that?
You can tell the developer whatever you'd like. So to answer your question, yes. Alderman Mulder.
So my concern and why I asked about the redevelopment plan earlier was because that requires a supermajority. And so that can be crafted.
I will not talk about height.
right?
I will talk about a proposed site plan, everything that's in there is not specifically density and those types of things. It's the
it's our-
general site, it's the improvements.
But it's our choice. But some of that redevelopment plan is going to talk about the things we want, and the things we want will require a building of the scale that is being proposed in this MOU right now. This is, I wish this wasn't in front of us. I feel like this is an impediment to the process and not helping the process, because we're not even talking about about the project. We're talking about the rules of engagement here, which is, so, I mean, I'll say it, there's serious concern about going 5 stories on this, and that 4 stories should be an option that we investigate. And I think that this is making it uncomfortable for us to have the conversation, and then the next vote we take in 2 weeks, we'll again have people here speaking against it, and then we have to talk about a redevelopment plan that isn't going to be, again, specific and let us have the conversation we want to have. And so the people that may be in favor of 4 stories but not 5 stories won't know how to vote on the redevelopment plan because it's not specific enough. So I feel like this document, I don't know whose decision it was. I think it was a really poor thing to put in front of us, because I think it creates for this body a really difficult position for us to address all of the concerns and have an open, transparent conversation about this.
So let's kind of take a step back. So when you look at the process was that they want to have confidence as to whether to move this forward. The request for the memorandum of understanding was from the developer. So that's why it's on the floor. And that's why it's on the floor at this period of time, is they're trying to make decisions on which way to go. So they've come to us with a project plan, some general concepts that you've seen for multiple months. We've gotten public feedback, and we're to a point of whether you want to start to move this forward. The challenging part with the financing is that it's complicated, and those are the things that Mr. Duffy does a brilliant job in trying to keep us on track. So while it's frustrating to have that in front of you, this is a process that was selected and that we have in front of us. You as a counselor are the policymakers, and so if we want to adjust that, we can go from there. But if you remember, input was given to this group, and from that input to the developers, they had confidence, obviously, I'm guessing, that this was the appropriate thing for them to continue to move forward. There's been a lot of public opinion, pro and con, and you've heard more of that public opinion, and it's up to you to make a decision on the direction in which you want to go. Alderman Rozak.
I believe we've done memorandums of understanding like this before, Bob, right? At this portion of the process. It doesn't mean that people couldn't, if there's massive opposition, you could just derail this project on multiple. I mean, we can just derail this on the day we do the developers agreement, which could be 2 months away. We could, deep six it in 2 weeks when we have the redevelopment plan, if there's not the 2/3 majority. So we've used these before. They actually have gotten us in trouble before too, when there was improperly drafted language in it. This does not have improperly drafted language in it. It does not have mandatory language. It's permissive language. And it just says what our general obligations are moving forward. And I agree with Lou. I think if you're not in favor of the proposals as we've got in front of us and that have been published, that have been presented, then vote against it. I'm in favor of it. I think this is what the community as a whole desires to see us move forward. It's progress. But in a way, it's also kind of hearkening back to there used to be hotels on these corners. There used to be very large buildings in downtown. We had a massive 4 or 5 story hotel in that corner where the Mann Building is back in the old days before it burned down. So yeah, is it a beautiful, serene lake to look across with Indian paths anymore? No. But all those people also built houses around the lake as well and developed the lake. So with the public improvements that we see, with the usage it's going to have, I think this is the right decision. I'm going to vote in favor of it with my amendment that we inject some of the funds that we have set aside for parks for whatever. You know, we have additional funds. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Village Green restroom funds, but it could be park impact fees. It could be a variety of other fees that we could put towards it to make this TIF end in a quicker period of time, which is a benefit to everyone.
Alderman Ellis.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the way I see it at this point is that this is not putting a nail in the coffin. What it's doing is it's giving them the ability to understand that we're serious about doing something here. And the fact of the matter here is, without that, they don't know whether they've got a project or they don't have a project. And then the question there is, why would they want to waste any time going through all these exercises without understanding that we're just as serious as they are? Am I right?
Correct.
So regardless, this is not binding. What they've shown us is not necessarily going to be the final product. What they're telling us here is, hey guys, we're serious. Are you serious? If you're not serious, we can go elsewhere. If you are serious, let's move on now. Let's have our conversation. Is that what I'm hearing, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Alderman Spiegelberg, and then I'll come over there. Sorry, I'm trying to get everybody.
I will vote yes for this, to propel this forward and keep this going, but with the public understanding that this is not an approval of the project as it stands now.
Alderman Douglas?
I guess kind of what Alderman Ellis said, but I mean, it's a non-binding contract. I mean, I think a lot of us are serious about redeveloping this area. This MOU is specifically talking about how much money is going to be put for the TID, what we want, and if we change it later, we're giving them direction to go forward with, we want all this stuff in here. This is what we're talking about for money. So they're going to bring a development plan to us saying, this is what we want. And then, but you're also talking about, this is not what we want by some constituents. I might vote differently later, and they're going to spend all this money to do this, and it's going to come forward, and then the buyer's going to say no. I mean, I think that's shame on us for doing that.
Alderman Kavieski.
I agree. So if we move this forward, expect a building approximately the size and mass of what has been proposed, because that supports the public infrastructure and the TIF.
Yeah.
And the numbers in there.
Correct.
If you're not in support of that, and they should be given a direction of shrinking the building and then what public infrastructure they can support with a 60-foot or 50-foot, whatever that is, then have that conversation.
Alderman Mulder.
Go ahead.
As I stated before, I do believe a significant development needs to happen in this space, just because of the necessary infrastructure that needs to be in place. I do support this project. The one piece I'm still not sold on is still the parking. I know that, that's been, besides the height, the kind of taking of the 18 feet to increase parking, I don't feel like that is that doesn't significantly impact what you're building there. That provides additional parking for the customers at the restaurant and for the retail. There would still be some parking available. So that, to me, I feel like I can vote on this comfortably, with that one piece still being something that I'm weighing.
Any further comments or questions for Mr. Duffy?
I would like to move.
Alderman Rozak, do you want to go ahead with your amended, your changes in your motion to the proposed?
Yeah, let me move to amend it first, and then we can have a final vote, because I think the amendment is something that we generally agree with, I would assume. So the third bullet point will be issue a $4,670,000 municipal revenue obligation as TID, and or may also include funds from other city sources, and then continuing that sentence, for the blight elimination and public improvements.
Do I have a second?
Second, Kavieski.
Any further discussion on this amendment?
Just the amendment.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
just the amendment. Any further questions? Call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman-Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Now I'd like to entertain a motion for the original project agreement for the North Street Main redevelopment.
So moved, as amended.
Second, Ellis.
Any further discussions? Call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Nay.
Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Nay.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
That moves forward. Thank you, Mr. Duffy. We'll move on to our next item. Consider act on ordinance 22-01036 to repeal and recreate section 1.022A, elected officials of the City of Oconomowoc Municipal Code, changing the mayoral term from 2 to 3 years with an effective date of April of 2024. This is the first reading of an ordinance change. This was brought forth by Alderman Spiegelberg, Alderman Ellis, and then also supported by myself. Alderman Ellis, do you want to make any comments?
Yeah, I do. Over the last couple of elections, I have witnessed and noticed a concern. I don't believe that the 2-year term for a mayor is one that is conducive to what this city really needs. What happens here is, first year, you're elected and you're trying to get your feet wet. And as soon as you begin the process of getting your feet wet, you turn around and you need to go ahead and start to go through the process again of becoming reelected. And so you really don't get a lot of projects off the ground and at least started. Mayor, I think you had mentioned it, that you kind of held back on a couple of things because you didn't know whether or not you're going to be reelected or not.
True.
And it's happened on way too many occasions. I think we're getting to a point now where the city is growing, and the city is growing in leaps and bounds, and there's got to be some sort of stability there. Also, I looked at it this way. It's unfair to those that are in the same term as the mayor, because if they decide that they want to run for that seat, they will lose the seat at which they are at this point. Whereas if it's a 3-year term, that potentially doesn't happen. So everybody has the ability to run at some point in time without the potential of losing their seat. So I really do think that it's to our benefit, it's to the community's benefit, it's to whomever the mayor may be benefit for us to begin looking at and talking about increasing that from 2 years to 3 years. Also, there are many communities out there that are now at 3 years. I know of 2 of them that are at 4 years, which I think is crazy. But I really do think at this point in time we need to start having that conversation.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
I won't reiterate anything that Kevin said. Those were all good points, and we have several other good points that are in our memorandum. I would support going to 3. There are very few communities. I couldn't even find any when I did a random search that have 2. I'm sure there are some. But when the ordinance was created for 2 years for mayors, our city population was less than 8,000 people. So now we're double that, and we're asking our part-time mayor to do a lot within 2 years. These are random ones I just randomly pulled up. I found 2, Waukesha, but that's a full-time position, is 4 years. Wauwatosa is 4 years. The other ones near us, Brookfield, New Berlin, Muskego, Hartford, Watertown, and Pewaukee are all 3 years.
And I just want to make a couple comments. I fully support this going forward because I think it's best for the city. And for the community, this has absolutely no impact on me personally. And this was brought and was supposed to be brought earlier in the year, and we recommended to aldermen, the two aldermen that had proponent, to wait until after the election, because you don't want to have it be an issue of somebody doing it right before an election. So that's an example of things that are good to postpone, so there's nobody that gets any personal gain out of it. I can tell you categorically from being in this position, it's very difficult when you're starting projects and how long they take to be able to see the things that you're passionate about go to the next level. I think 4 years is too long because we want to make sure that you have somebody in the office that's doing overall the best job for the city, and that puts a little bit more risk on the size of our city. I did go out and reached out to all of the past mayors that currently live in the city of Oconomowoc. There are 5 of them plus one that was an interim for 2 months, and you'll see that in your packet. All 6 of them signed a letter stating to you that they are all in favor of going to 3 years. And most of them, actually almost all of them, said this should have been done a long time ago. I'm doing it because I think it's a right in helping these guys. It was really Kevin's idea, what, a year and a half ago, that he brought to me, but we just didn't have the capacity to really look into it to any depth. I think this is the right time. Remember, this is an ordinance. This does need a supermajority, and it is a first reading. The running for mayor becomes expensive. And I can say that categorically because I paid for all of my expenses myself. And all of a sudden you get into office after a year and a half, and then you have to do it all over again. So you can look at the pros and cons of it, but at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is have consistency and seeing projects to fruition. Think of the things that we've done over the last 2 years in a pandemic and see the things that still have to happen. The reason I ran for a second term was because I want to see those things happen, and I want to be part of it. That's the passion of this position. So again, that's a very personal approach to it, but I also thought, well, maybe I'm wrong, and that's why I went out and literally sat and talked one-on-one with each one of the former mayors. And it wasn't even a question, yeah, absolutely. Even a former alderman who had been an interim mayor for two months, Alderman Miller, said, yeah, absolutely, who's seen both sides of it. But when you sit in this chair, it's very, very different than being an alderman. And I hope that you guys respect that and that you push this forward, because I think it's a right thing for our community, because it really is a full-time position. I'm not advocating for that. I just want to see it so they can have more consistency. Open for questions and comments. Alderman Rozak.
So I've got some concern with this. First point I think is interesting is if the mayor's doing a good job, we should keep him longer. He should be here for 3 years. But what happens when we have a mayor that's doing a bad job? We now have to wait another year to get the bum out. I think we shouldn't be doing anything to coddle or protect our politicians. I'm one of those aldermen that are on the same term you are with the mayoral run. So I've always been there since I ran. I knew that when I ran. If I ever wanted to run for mayor, which I'm not announcing or saying I am, or have any interest in, if I got to give up my seat, so be it. I don't give up my seat. I could run for both seats. That happens all the time. And you know what? If I have to give up my seat to run for the mayor because I think that's my passion and my goal, I should do that. I also think it's ironic that we have all of these former mayors who are all telling us now, oh yeah, that's a great idea, we should have done that. Where were they for 45 years doing it?
Well,
They just
come
weren't
on,
here.
that's a little bit ridiculous.
No, it's not. No. They all said we should have done it. This is needed. Not one of them, proposed it. And all of them, though.
I'm sorry, Matt, but I had this conversation with Dave when he was mayor.
Okay, well, he didn't propose it.
As a matter of fact, on 2 occasions, he was going to bring it up to for us in what is it in the whole, and he chose at that point in time because we had another project that was going to, with the police station and things,
Okay.
not to do it.
Well, that,
Okay.
you know,
So-
he had the chance to do it as mayor to put it on the agenda. That's really beside the point. All the folks that are on here, except for Kohlenberg and Miller, who are kind of aberrations, and Kohlenberg left after 2 years. All of the mayors, including our current mayor, now have 5 to 16-year terms of times they've spent as mayor. So if they were doing a good job, they get reelected. If they're doing a bad job, they either leave or we vote them out. So I don't think we should do anything to protect politicians. You don't need to protect my role. If I want to run for mayor, I'll run for mayor, give up my seat, or run for both. I think and I don't know what you were looking at, Karen, but of the majority of the mayoral terms for the part-time positions are still just 2 years for all these communities on the back of the memo. The majority,
What communities?
all of them.
No, and it's, you know, trying to coddle politicians. I hear what you're saying, but I argue that what you're trying to do is create stability within an office that has a ton of roles that takes a lot of work, and it's very difficult to have consistency. And
but you got consistency.
There are multiple reasons to do it. I mean, to me, it's actually a no-brainer, but I'm gonna, Alderman Kavieski.
So originally, I wasn't going to be here tonight, because my son was graduating, but so congratulations to Walker for graduating from St. Jerome's. When I saw on the phone that it had started late, as soon as he got his certificate, I came over. So
thank you.
I had a pre-written statement and position on this, and this has been my position on this topic for a long time. This has not changed. But every municipality has a unique local government structure. From city to village to town, with elected representatives that vary from mayor council to board president and trustees in various terms and time commitments. Our community has chosen the style, term, and commitment for the elected officials to serve the people. The term of 2 years allows for the people to correct or support the mayor in a timely fashion and hold all positions most accountable. To your point that you can start a project and you want to see it through, you're always going to have a project, whether you're an alderman or a mayor, that is in the works. So to have that as the impetus to continue to extend terms, for me personally, I don't subscribe to that, and it doesn't work. It has worked in what we have right now effectively and efficiently, and will continue to do so, much like our United States Constitution. It's not broken. And until the need to address a full-time mayor is required, the length of time should not be altered. Like the Constitution, any amendments that are provided require a consent by the governed. When we represent the citizens of the city of Oconomowoc. We do not represent a desire to oversee the projects or a sense of requirement to finish a personal vision. Again, not directed to you specifically, anybody who sits in that seat.
I'm not taking this personally at all. It's just an operational thing that I guess I'm not getting my point across, but please continue.
Again, I've held this, this position that I'm expressing right now previously in the multiple times that this has come up, because this has come up at least 2 times prior, and it hasn't come to the floor because it hasn't seen the support of the council to get to that point. That conclusion has been constructed through, my position has been my conclusion based on constructed through reflective, thoughtful, and considerate positions in regards to length of term and time of term. And again, I think at some point we're going to have a full-time mayor. And I think that would probably be the next step, as opposed to extending a part-time mayor over a longer period of time. And when that comes...
And I think the approach that I'm projecting is that this is a transition to that you can either agree or disagree with. Alderman Cloth had a comment.
So on a more lighthearted note, in the additional analysis, it says most mayors were aldermen first.
Mm-hmm.
So just out of curiosity, I know you weren't. Which of these were?
Just Nold.
Nold. Kohlenberg was after, Kohlenberg was
Berg was
after,
after.
after his mayoral
Yeah.
term.
Bodie.
Bodie.
I don't think Floss was.
Floss wasn't.
Floss wasn't? I don't know.
I don't believe so.
I don't think Jim
Old Miller, Fody.
And neither was Marlene Schumacher. She's not on here,
She's
but I mean,
not
she's
on there,
passed
yeah.
away.
Right.
She passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a good question.
Some are.
Alderman Ellis.
Matt, you make a, you stated something in reference to the mayors of yesteryear. And if, what I appreciate about them is the fact that they had been there and done that. And the fact of the matter here is that they ran, they won for a number of years, a number of terms, and then they went ahead and they said, I don't want to do this anymore. For them to sign this document and state that, yeah, at the end of the day, 3 years works better than 2 because the stress associated with, the stress level associated with, once again, trying to figure out if you're even going to be elected the second or the third or the fourth time has now been taken away, holds a lot of weight with me in the sense that they're saying something that they wish would have occurred when even they were in office. That's what I see when I read this.
Alderman Mulder?
I am in favor of this. I think that to your point, Karen, I think the job has grown considerably. Certainly, the city is twice what it was when Floss was in office. I think that whether we should have a full-time mayor, I'm not sure, but the number of hours required for this job and the pay per hour really limits the number of people that can run for mayor. People that are in the prime earning years of their
I'm
life.
not in my prime, thanks.
You're in your prime, just your kids are grown. It would be hard for me to imagine being 40 again with little kids and being mayor. And so the attraction of doing it every 3 years versus 2 years, I don't think it's a matter of accountability. Matt, I hear you on that, but I don't feel like we're giving anybody a pass by adding an additional year of service to someone who's, helping along with the administrator run a city of, what will be 30,000 people in a decade. So I just feel like it's there's reasons to do it, and I don't, just to make sure we have the candidates we want, and that it gets the attention we want. I think it's an appropriate move.
Alderman Kavieski.
Our state assembly gets elected every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
The state, and those districts are larger than just the city, though there's costs associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
But they get elected every 2 years. So, and they get reelected based on how they govern as the predominant factor associated with their vote.
So I think that's a great thing, and I agree with that component. I would argue that that job is very different than being the mayor.
All of them are different, right? But it's a 2-year term, so the discussion about the time and bringing things forward and not bringing things forward. When Nold, Mayor Nold was here, he governed up until the last meeting.
He held things back because he wanted the next mayor to be able to take the reins of things. And he told me that personally. As I held a couple things back because I wanted to make sure that the next mayor had the full control to do it the way that they wanted. I think, we can argue this a lot of different ways. And this has nothing to do with me, guys. What this has to do with what is best for the community. And this is a recommendation that I fully support from the 2 aldermen because knowing the operations, being in it at a very, very high level without a city administrator, you can really see the value. And I would love to have the next mayor be a 3-year term. I think it's best for the city. That's all that this is about. If it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. If it does pass, then we have changes moving forward. Any other questions or comments? Think we can probably vote? Are we good to vote?
I need a
I don't give a
motion.
motion.
We'll need a
And a
motion,
second.
yeah.
So
I'll move.
moved.
Second, Mulder.
Any further discussion? And great conversations. I appreciate all the comments. Let's call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper,
Nay.
Alderman Kavieski,
Nay.
Alderman Douglas,
Nay.
Alderman Rozak,
Nay.
Alderman Altman Cloth,
Yay,
Alderman Ellis,
Aye.
or aye, sorry.
Alderman Spiegelberg,
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
It's a
So,
tie, but it
it's a
doesn't
tie.
matter because it has to have a supermajority. And you know what my opinion is, so this will not come back to council while I'm currently mayor. So thank you all for considering it and looking at that as an option. Let's move on to any staff reports.
No,
Mr.
sir.
Fry, do we have anything?
Nope.
Anything? Any comments from the alderman? Alderman
Question.
Spiegelberg.
This says first reading, so how does that affect us? We didn't waive the second reading.
There's
It
no
would have
second
come
reading unless
back.
the
Has to
first one
pass the first
passes.
reading
Right, it would have
first.
to
to go
pass,
to
and
the
then it would
second
come
reading.
back.
Yep.
So it's
Okay.
dead.
Yep.
Yeah. Alderman Kavieski.
Alderman comment?
Pardon me?
Are we moved on to Alderman comment?
Yes, please.
Just real quick, June 18th, there are 3 events at Fowler Lake Park for SOFA, Saving Others for Archie. They focus on mental health, suicide prevention, and substance use and recovery. There is a 988 5K to bring awareness to the new national 3-digit hotline associated with mental health and suicide prevention, which is 988. It's a second annual. It is the 8th annual Jump for Archie to create awareness and resources and support for those who struggle with drug use and are actively in recovery, to support that, as well as a community concert which features the 52nd Street Billy Joel tribute band. It's all of those events, with the exception of the 5K, are free and open to the public. The 5K has a small registration fee associated with it, and we do, I'm on the board, for full disclosure, of SOFA. We have found sponsors to support the registration fee of the 5K for veterans, first responders, and students within our community and surrounding communities. So registration isn't a hurdle for them to participate in that. I hope to see the community out to support the activities and the awareness and those who are struggling, because Lord knows there are quite a few and they need our help.
Great. Any other comments from Alderman? With no addition, Alderman Altman Cloth.
I know, sorry, I know it's late.
That's okay.
So with what Lou said with that event, I know how the Silver Circle platform works for registering. There's a spot where we could create a group, and it could be the City of Oconomowoc group.
Actually, it's something that
We
Lou's,
could win.
Lou's,
Just by the numbers, because I know how his scoring system
Yeah.
works. We don't even have to be fast, we just need lots.
That channel's got a group though, watch
Oh, watch out, now, it might just be me, but now City of Oconomowoc is coming for you.
Yeah, no, that's
I'll
great.
look for
And
Kevin.
actually, Lou had brought that to the city too, which I think is a great idea. Great idea. Any other comments from Alderman? With no additional comments from the mayor, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.